Our children are good kids. Or so someone would like to believe as a little girl cries very loudly with all of her heart. Their children are angelic, unlike any other children in the world. But sadly, not just anyone can become their parents. In the scene walks a man, quite large in stature, who smiles at the children and announces that he will be the father of one of them starting today. He places his big hand on a little boy's shoulder, for these children are raised for special parents, and they have received special education. Of course, it is normal to wonder what this special education is, and we will know the answer soon enough. For now, the children wave goodbye to the nurse in charge of them, who tells them they have done enough. Instantly after, her smile disappears and her face goes cold. It is now the training time, and the children whip out weapons. Their faces harden and each of them has a sharp tool. The nun scolds little Ellie, telling her that there is no need to let her nose run when she is pretending to cry, and that parents may hate children who appear slow-witted or dense. Little Ellie blows her nose and promises to keep it in mind. The kind of education given to the children is a gift for them, and these children were trained as weapons the moment they started walking. They were thoroughly raised under special muscular disciplinarians. Thanks to that, it is extremely expensive to nurture each child. Now you must be wondering what these children are being used for. Let's just say that the children are like computers, and how they are used is determined completely by the people who buy them. The ones called their parents use them for various tasks. For instance, the one who just bought a boy shows him a picture and tells him to memorize the target's face. However, since the children are dangerous, safety measures are taken, and certain rules are imprinted within them from a young age. Essentially, it just means that they cannot disobey. In this messed up world, these rules are called the 3 absolute principles. These 3 principles are designed to ensure that the buyer can control the children, and it is crucial that they are remembered. The little boy informs his new father that a car is following them, and the man is confused and asks the young boy what he said. He yells at the boy, telling him to shut up and memorize the face on the picture in front of him. The boy accepts the order and focuses on the picture, ignoring the car behind them. This moment only enforces the first crucial principle, which states that the parents' words are absolute. So, the car behind them crashed into theirs with reckless abandon. The car spun off the road and tumbled while the other one skidded to a stop. Needless to say, the new father lay unconscious on the ground as his quote-unquote son stared at him. The second principle was that the children could not use their powers without their parents' permission, which gives us the hint that this accident was not caused by the boy. In fact, he rushed to carefully check his father's pulse to see if he's even alive. That's when gunmen arose from the other car and aimed their weapons towards the fallen man. As they approached, they were surprised to see a child fall into the ground. The child cried with blood on his face, crying like he was afraid, asking the men to help his dad who was no longer breathing. The men looked at each other with confusion, unsure because they had not expected to find a child with their target. One of them considered getting rid of him, but the other gunman could not see the point since he was just a child. They figured that they should just dump him somewhere and leave to avoid any complications with their task. One of the men approached the crying child, called out to him, and apologized, saying that adults have their own circumstances. But before he could say any more, the child had already dug a knife into his throat. You see, the third and most important principle was activated in the event that the parent's safety was threatened. The man choked on his blood as he grabbed his throat, and the child stole his gun. The other gunman was confused to see his colleague's body go limp, while the child aimed the gun from the armpit of the fallen killer. Now, to reiterate the third principle, it states that if their parents were threatened, the children were to ignore the above 2 rules and resolve the situation completely on their own. And as he was taught, the little dude fired with expert precision, instantly killing the second assassin. This is when the father in charge of the mansion smiled and said that they were such good children. The father's grin widened and his teeth of gold and silver shone wickedly as he asked what his client thought, showing them a list of available children and asking if they were interested in making a purchase. The client made a selection and the director hummed thoughtfully as he scratched his chin. Unfortunately, it was impossible to adopt the child that they had selected. This was because that child was their only blemish. The child's abilities were the highest among all of their children, and he was a true elite. Even the director was personally fond of him too. However, they had lost him. The child had disappeared and they tried tracking him down, but without a parent, he could not use his power, so he would not draw any attention. The child in question was of course the little boy whose father had been killed. By now, the director was sure that the little boy was living as an ordinary child somewhere, or the boy could even be dead. A fist came flying at a teenager, hitting him square in the gut. The poor boy fell and the attacker laughed that the hit really landed, and he called the teenager, Huno. The other bullies laughed, and the attacker grinned, asking his victim if he had something to say. The victim with big round owl glasses had actually sworn. However, he turned around and laughed that he had said 15, and that the punch felt like it was worth 15 points. The bullies laughed and said that 15 was generous, agreeing that the attacker, who was called Joseph, had definitely delivered a punch worth 15 points. Meanwhile, their victim secretly cursed at them. Then, attacker Joe asked how many points a kick would be worth, and another boy stepped up and excitedly offered to take the kick. The blonde boy eagerly wanted to kick our dude. The blonde asked with excitement how many points he would be worth as he tried punching our guy, and attacker Joe just watched with a smile. Our dude finally swore, changed his mind for a minute there, then he changed his mind and swore again. Park Shin was informed that our dude had just cursed, and the boys complained that our dude's damage meter was really strict. The blonde yelled that our guy was malfunctioning, but our dude was done with their nonsense when he could easily beat them up. However, Attack Joe asked the blondie, who was called Shin, what he was doing. He slapped the blonde and smirked, telling him not to act cocky since Attacker Joe had already claimed our dude as his personal pinata. He asked the blonde if he understood and Shin curled his fist in anger. However, he then laughed that it was a solid hit worth 150,000 points, which was expected from someone who studied abroad, and his physique was completely different. The blonde continued to praise Attacker Joe, asking him how much he benched and asked if he benched in pounds. Attacker Joe smiled as his vanity was stroked and asked the blonde to buy him some cigarettes later, and the blonde quickly asked if he wanted menthol. After Attacker Joe left, Shin swore to get him next time, even though he thought the bully was really cool when he talked in that American accent. Our dude glared at him, annoyed that he could easily beat the blonde. Suddenly, the blonde called to our dude the victim, grabbed his neck and growled that our dude's cursing was too much when he could have just said 52 points. Our dude struggled in his hold and growled in annoyance. The blonde said that our dude was coming with him and that he was dead today for real. Our dude stared at him in confusion when he was later brought to a tteokbokki shop, and Blondie insisted that our guy buy him some since he was out of money after running all those errands for Attacker Joe. Our dude nervously agreed, but he growled at that rascal internally. The blonde immediately got offended and asked if our dude thought it was a waste of money to spend it on him, but our dude would happily spend money on Attacker Joe. However, our dude just said that this place, the Huno snack shop, which had the same name as him, was run by his mom. She beamed as she pulled out some food for them, happy to see her son had a friend, and she told him to have some fish cakes too. The blonde bully was surprised that his mom was the owner and realized that was why the shop was named after him. Our dude had managed to hide the shop until now, but of all the people to know, he could not believe that he was caught by someone like Blondie. The evil blonde licked his rat teeth and he grinned that he could not act like a stranger. Our dude panicked, wondering what Blondie would do to his mom, and that messing with his mom was crossing the line. Blondie happily called out to his auntie and our dude already had a pen in his hand. Our trained killer raised his pen to inflict maximum damage when Blondie suddenly bowed his head and apologized for not greeting her earlier. He introduced himself as her son's friend and even told her his name. Blondie went on to say that the shop's name seemed unique and our dude had to stop mid-assault. His mom beamed and laughed that her son had always told her not to make it so obvious, and the blonde bully laughed, saying that was no good and that his mom worked so hard for him. However, our dude could not trust him, and there was no telling what that bully would do if he stayed. So, our dude hurried and said that they needed to go since their friends were waiting. She was surprised and then quickly packed up some food for Shin and his friends to share. Our dude was horrified and insisted that she had no reason to do all that. Meanwhile, Blondie was excited to have access to all that free food. She smiled that she did not need to sell any more today, and Blondie was elated that she was giving all of that to them. Our dude mentally begged her not to do this, but she smiled and said that her son's friends were like her children. And the blonde smiled and agreed with her, much to our dude's despair. The blonde was not at all what his mom thought he was. The wicked blonde smiled that they would enjoy the food, and our dude grabbed his hand. He begged the blonde to not tell Joseph or any of the other guys, and he begged him to do this one favor. The blonde smiled that he would handle it, and he wished our dude's mom farewell. His mom smiled and told him to bring his friends next time, and the blonde happily said that he would bring his friends with him next time. Our dude was very upset and asked his mom why she was doing all this, and he screamed that he told her to act like she did not know him. Our dude did not know why he was yelling at his mom. He had just become so upset, and he had no idea why she bent her head sheepishly, saying that she had just been happy to see his friends for the first time. She apologized and he did not understand why she was apologizing. His mom explains that she just wanted him to get along with his friends, and she apologizes, saying that he should not be mad at her. Meanwhile, our dude just wishes she would stop apologizing. If she kept doing that, then things would not work out for him. The next day at school, someone dropped a napkin on our dude's food and swore. Despite all of our dude's efforts, Attacker Joe had finally found out that our dude's mom sold tteokbokki. The bully smiled and said that he went to buy some, but he found a rage in the tteokbokki. He laughed that he could not eat it like this, and asked our dude to refund him. He then laughed wickedly and asked if he should ask our dude's mom for a refund instead. The bully laughed that he could just say that he was a friend of her son, and our dude thought darkly of how he had begged the blonde. Attacker Joe kept on teasing him, saying that they were friends. The bully's eyes went dark and he asked our dude if he was upset when they should be getting along. He poured the food all over our dude's head, saying that he could not eat it and that he would have to tell our guy's mom about everything. Our dude was covered in sauce and he shook with a pen in his hand. Attacker Joe was confused at our dude's reaction, when our dude suddenly lunged at him with a sharpened pencil. However, he froze when he recalled his mom saying that she just wanted him to get along with his friends, and he remembered her apologizing. His hand froze, stilled by the order she had given, and attacker Joe looked in shock as he saw the pencil aimed at his neck. Our dude's hand shook but he was frozen, and the class was silent. Attacker Joe then cursed and asked exactly what our dude thought he was doing with rage burning in his eyes. Later, the blondie strolled into the class, asking after our dude, but he paused when he saw the entire class sitting silently, and the police at the back of the class with the school teacher. There was a pair of broken glasses on the floor, and a large hole in the window, with blood on the ground. That day, our dude Huno was beaten continuously by attacker Joe for about 15 minutes. He passed out several times and regained consciousness due to the pain several times, and each time he apologized and begged, saying that he was sorry. However, the violence did not stop and attacker Joe kept on hitting him, and no one did anything to intervene or stop it. In the end, the one who put an end to the violence was our dude himself, and he jumped out of the window and landed on the boulder outside. Meanwhile, attacker Joe had a good idea, and he planned to say that our dude Huno was pushed out by a bunch of his supporters. They were surprised and defended themselves, saying that they did not do anything. However, Attack Joe insisted, and said that he had heard of a good law in Korea. The law was called Juvenile Act, but attacker Joe was held back a year so it does not apply to him, which is why he is asking his friends to help him out. The wicked bully asks his friends to turn themselves in and to tell the police that they had pushed our dude. However, they were hesitant as they had also heard about the act, but they could still get sued for damages. The evil attacker Joe smiled and said that there was a way around that too. He believed that they would not get sued as long as there was no one to file a lawsuit. Even if the dudes got caught, he laughed that they would be protected under the Juvenile Act. Still, his friends were hesitant, so attacker Joe pulled out his last play card, saying he was not asking them to help for free, and he poured out a suitcase, offering them 10 million won per person. Then, he asked if they knew where our dude lived. Our dude's mom sat by herself in a room looking lost and saddened by what had happened to her son. They lived in a tall-story building and attacker Joe had shown up, asking what floor they lived on. His goons explained it was the 5th floor, so they tried to use the elevator but it did not work at all. Attacker Joe did not care and said that they could just use the stairs. He started up the stairs, telling the other guys to hurry as they were almost there. As they climbed, they happened upon a fire extinguisher that had been stuck at the elevator doors and was the reason the elevator had malfunctioned. Attacker Joe stared at the extinguisher and cursed, wondering what it was. A voice asked why he was so late, and Attacker Joe turned in surprise to see a person sitting on the stairs. It was Blondie, and he complained that the bully had kept him waiting. Attacker Joe asked Blondie what he was doing there, but one of the goons said that it was perfect timing and he asked the blonde to come with them. The blonde stood and told them that he was going to ask them 2 questions, and he would prefer if they kept their answers short. The first question was about how they found out about Huno's snack shop, since that was Blondie's secret spot. Attacker Joe smirked at the question and said that he was curious about Blondie not bringing the cigarettes, and instead found him eating with the neighborhood kids. So, he went to investigate and found Huno arguing with his mom in front of the shop. Blondie explained that they had been arguing because of him, so he had a second question and he needed Attacker Joe to answer that question very carefully. He asked what the group of guys had come to Huno's house to do. Attacker Joe laughed, saying that it was obvious. He had come to see Huno's mom who was sleeping carefree after filing a lawsuit against them, and they had come with weapons with the intention to maim. Then, the evil bully smiled wide and said that it was perfect timing, as he had been annoyed with Blondie all the while. He had noticed by now that Blondie had only been pretending to bully their victim, and was actually helping Huno escape their torture. Attacker Joe grins that he will not be taken as an idiot, and that he knew all this time. However, Blondie decides that he has heard enough, and he retrieves the fire extinguisher from where it sits between the elevator doors. Attacker Joe curses at him and charges with the intention to beat Blondie to a pulp. However, Blondie just thanked him for confirming his suspicions. Then he pulled out the fire extinguisher pin and said that he suspected Attacker Joe's plans, but he needed to be sure. Aiming the hose at the bully, he let it loose and washed the wicked villain in a spray of fire extinguisher power. Attacker Joe cursed and commanded his goons to beat up Blondie. However, before they could even step forward, the fire extinguisher came flying right at them through the cloud of powder. Blondie had flung the extinguisher right into their faces and it knocked the first guy down expeditiously. Even Attacker Joe got knocked down by the force of the goon falling on top of him. He growls and tells the goons to get out of his way. Rage floods him as he approaches Shin, who is fighting the other goons still left standing, hitting them with another fire extinguisher. Attacker Joe curses at him and he swings his great metal stick, but Blondie blocks the strike with a fire extinguisher. Attacker Joe tried to make a dent in his extinguisher shield, but it did not happen. Instead, Blondie dodges the bully's attack and slams the extinguisher down on Attacker Joe's foot. The bully's eyes widen in shock as pain courses through his body. He screams as his foot becomes a bloody mess, crying out that it was broken and howling like a child. He keeps yelling that he heard a weird sound in his foot and curses at Blondie continuously. Blondie just informs the bully that the metatarsal bones above his cuneiform bone are broken. He goes on to tell the bully that he will not be able to walk now, and the bully whimpers, asking why he is doing this. Courteously, Blondie explains that the 3 principles imprinted on the children include that the parents' words are absolute. He recites the second rule as he punches the daylights out of the confused bully and knocks his face into the ground. The second rule is that a child cannot use their powers without the parents' permission. The goons have no idea what Blondie is talking about and they are all afraid. However, the third and most important rule is recited as attacker Joe cries and begs for his life. If the parent's safety is threatened, the first two rules must be ignored and the child must resolve the situation. Blondie twists the hand of attacker Joe, who whines in pain. Then Blondie explains that Hyunho's mom had said that her son's friends were like her children, which meant that she was classified as Blondie's mom. This also meant that these goons had threatened his mom, and that meant that he could crush them, which was exactly what he did while saying that they should understand. Blondie then proceeded to beat them senseless. Meanwhile, at the mansion that raised the soldier children, the director allowed someone into his office. He was told that they had received a call from Korea, and he asked who could possibly have been calling. The nun informed him that it was the White Tiger workforce, and the director turned and asked her to hand over the phone. He informed the workforce that it was the director speaking, and they told him that they suspected they had found their target. The lost legend of the dead mansion that went missing years ago, codenamed Sean. They had found the boy in Korea. Blondie was the dead mansion's special training multipurpose weapon, Project Good Child, codenamed Sean. Out of the children that were made by the dead mansion, he was the best work. He was the best at working undercover and using weapon skills, as well as assassination to top it all off. He was considered a product that was on a completely different level in all senses. That being the case, he was supposed to be sent to a Yakuza family that was one of the mansion's top clients. However, there was a delivery mistake, and instead of Japan, the child had been sent to Korea. He had nervously tried to speak Japanese to the locals, but they did not understand him. It had already been 5 years since then, and the director had given up on ever finding the boy again, thinking that he would be dead. He was so grateful that the child had been returned to him, and he dispatched nuns to go find him, and told them to do what they had to do. The nun in charge of the process was Rachel, and she said that she would start the collection process right away. She dropped her nun garments and said that if something were to go wrong, then she would just use force, and pulled out the heavy guns she was armed with. Her name was Rachel, and she was one of the dead mansion traitors. The director was not happy to hear her words, and he told her to bring back the prize without hurting him too much, and he also asked the sulking nun to leave her gun behind so that she would not go overboard. Joseph's father, Kwon Byung-woo, bowed his head low, saying that he had no excuses and that it was his fault for not raising his child any better. The large businessman bowed in front of the owner of the Tteokbokki shop and promised to pay for her son's treatment costs, his mental care, and whatever else she requested. However, the woman said that nothing would change even if the businessman prostrated in front of her, since it was not something that would end with a simple apology. The businessman was speechless as he stayed bowed, and the woman did not even turn to look at him. The businessman raised his head slowly, confused that his gesture did not work. He stood and turned immediately, deciding that he would just get going with the most emotionless look on his face. She was shocked that he was just leaving like that. However, he turned to her while wiping his face. The businessman told her that he believed that efficiency was the most important thing in all that people did. But seeing as she had no intentions of negotiating, then he had no reason to keep wasting his time. So, he had plenty of other options that he could expend, and that was what he specialized in. So, he stepped into his vehicle and rubbed his nose with a handkerchief. In the car, he complained that his nose was stinging from all that dust and stench. The businessman could not understand how Hyunho's mom was even doing business in such a place. The wicked man then asked his people to just tear the place down and to raise a brand new building. Then, he asked about the condition of Hyunho, asking his driver if it had been taken care of. The driver explained that the assistant was taking care of it, and that the assistant would be done with it by now, and should be calling in. The businessman hummed to himself as he glanced out the window. Meanwhile, at the hospital, attacker Joe is still alive and cursing in his hospital bed. He had suspected that there was something off about Blondie, he just had no idea how bad it would be. He complained to his dad that Blondie had said something about 3 principles that were engraved in him. The businessman had asked if it was something trending among the kids these days. However, attacker Joe had no idea. He went on ranting about how he'd been beat up, but his dad made him pause his rant. His dad then asked the nurse to kindly leave them alone for a bit, and that he just needed to do something real quick. The nurse left them, and attacker Joe turned to the businessman in confusion, still cursing Blondie. However, with the nurse gone, the businessman delivered a hefty slap to his son's face. He scolded his son and called him by name, asking his child if he knew what he was most angry about. The businessman did not care if his son bullied kids to the point that they jumped from a classroom window. He was annoyed that his son went to the victim's house to finish things off, and then failed to handle it cleanly. The basics of their wicked work was to not do the same thing twice, and he leered at his son with the most evil expression in his eyes. The businessman told attacker Joe to use the chance to learn properly about how adults handle things. Meanwhile, Blondie gets kicked and he falls to the dirt. Grown men heft him to his feet and he stares in confusion, asking the men what they are doing. However, they hit him without giving him a proper response. A duffel bag has fallen to the ground, and it does not take long for Blondie to also hit the ground. The men mock him, saying that things are not going as he planned. This fight will be different from when Blondie beat up 4 kids of his age. The grown man with glasses throws his glove on Blondie's head, saying that things work differently with adults, and that the young master, attacker Joe, had become half crippled because of Blondie. So, they grabbed his arm, intending to also make him repent. Blondie's arm was twisted behind his back and the man prepared to step on him. His eyes widened in shock as his arm was twisted, and he cried out in pain. The grown man in glasses said that this was how adults dealt with things. Later that evening, our guy, Blondie, groaned as he pushed himself to his feet, and mocked the way the grown had spoken to him. He mocked them for not knowing the difference between a broken bone and dislocated joints as he pushed his arm back into the right place. Something like what they had done to him did not even come close to Rachel's punishments, and that aside, things had gotten troublesome. Blondie could not use his full strength without command due to the 3 principles, and he hoped that revenge against him would be enough to calm things down. If it was not, he would have to get a new identity, and that was also troublesome. However, someone called out to him, and he was surprised to see Hyunoo's mother. She asked why he looked so beat up. Our dude nervously said hello as things had gotten even more troublesome, and he somehow got invited to eat at the mom's shop. He picked at his food silently, pushing the food around the plate, and she smiled, saying that he did not have to be polite. She was fine, so she wanted him to eat a lot. This meant that Blondie had been commanded to eat a lot. As expected, he thought of Hyunoo's mother as his own parents and Blondie could not resist her commands. Immediately he happily dug into the food, much to her surprise. She was worried that he would choke at this rate and asked him to drink some water, to which Blondie responded by grabbing a cup of water and downing it immediately. Blondie slammed the cup of water on the table, and sighed in relief now that he had completed her command, and thanked her for the food. It made the mum happy to see him like this, and Blondie hesitantly asked if her son was doing better. She smiled and said that he was fine, and that the doctor said that the surgery went fine, so they only have to keep an eye on him. The mum smiles and says that their Hyunoo is tough, and so, even if he is going through hard times now, he will overcome it. However, her hands shake as she admits that she cannot do that. The mother cries because her child is in such a state, and she cannot do anything about it. Hyunoo's mother wanted to destroy everything, like the pain in her heart, and attack Joe's father. She wanted to tear the emotionless businessman to pieces, and she cried into the counter of the Tteokbokki shop while Blondie listened. She turned to apologize to him, saying that she should not be like this. However, to her surprise, Blondie was no longer at the table and the mother wondered where Blondie had gone. Meanwhile, at a fancy corporation, someone says that they will end the quarterly report for the 3rd quarter. He is an emotionless businessman, and he gives a toast to all of his workers who have worked hard. Thereby Woo Constructions is there on that stage because of the efforts of the workers, and he congratulates them for not faltering even when the mother company, Juwon Constructions, went under. Meanwhile, a suspicious blonde-looking waiter serves wine to all who are present. One of the workers agrees and asks the blonde to pour some wine for him, but he gets his face smacked by the wine bottle. He falls with a cry as the blonde smiles and tells the worker to have his fill. Of course, the blonde is our friendly neighborhood Blondie, and another of the workers rushes at him in rage. Blondie flings 2 cups at the charging worker. The worker scoffs that our dude is pretty good at running around, but he is surprised when he sees the 2 glass mugs fall on his hands. Blondie delivers an efficient kick that knocks the mug into the worker's face and the glass shatters. Then, Blondie grabs some knives and forks. The guards are screaming that the blonde kid should be nabbed, but he flings cutlery into their eyes and they scream with cries of pain. More guards pop out to ask what all the noise is about, and someone yells for the lights to get turned on. The guards are confused and ask who is attacking, and one of the guards tells them all to chase after a blonde kid. They do not think that he could have gone far, and they are sure he is still around. Meanwhile, the businessman on the podium is confused by all the ruckus over a blonde-haired kid. Blondie is hidden under a table, and he recalls the first principle for the children of the dead mansion. The words of the parent were absolute, and he dashed out from underneath the table with a knife in his hands. Blondie could not forget the tearful words that had been spoken by the mother of Hyunoo, who cried about wanting to tear the emotionless businessman to pieces. The cutlery knife dripped with blood as cries came from all those who worked with the businessman. His adopted mother had wished to tear her enemies apart. The guards had finally found him and they charged at him once again. He whipped up a tablecloth and threw it at them to distract and confuse them. Then he slid in on a table and crushed some of the men underneath it with his weight. A knife came flying at him, but he dodged it easily and raised his head to see who had attacked. The attacker was nonchalant about his knife missing its target, but he was sure that he had broken Blondie's arm. The attacker was none other than Glasses from the other day, and he was sure that he would do proper damage this time. However, Blondie charged at him and grabbed Glasses' hand. Then our dude gave the man a punch so severe that it knocked his glasses off. Seizing Glasses' arm, he told him to watch carefully and to learn how to properly break an arm. Blondie twisted the man's arm and Glasses screamed in pain, before falling to the floor in defeat. Suddenly, a shot rang past Blondie's ear, and he turned dark eyes towards the businessman that headed the organization. The businessman had fired a gun at Blondie from the safety of his balcony, and he mumbled that it was harder to aim than he had thought. Blondie admitted that it would be pretty hard for the other man to hit him from such a distance unless he was a shooting pro. So, the businessman descended the stairs, commenting on how knowledgeable Blondie appeared, and he asked the kid if he was a shooting pro. The businessman had heard that the kids in Korea were often part of crews, and he asked our dude if he was part of something like that. Our dude, Blondie, knew nothing about that, but if the businessman was to ask what he was affiliated with, then the answer was snack shop. The businessman cocked his head in confusion at such a response. He cannot believe that this trained professional is affiliated with the cheap snack shop that is located in a foul-smelling alley. The businessman points the gun directly at Blondie's head and says that he finally gets it. He asks Blondie if the shop owner asked for his death, staring right down the barrel of the gun. Blondie denies that and says that the shop owner asked him to tear the businessman to pieces. The businessman is confused, but the gun is suddenly knocked out of his hand and it goes flying as Blondie punches the villain. The businessman grabs our guy by the collar and curses, asking if this is revenge. However, Blondie explains that this is not revenge or payback. Then he punches the businessman again, this time right in the face. The villain falls to the floor as the blonde reminds him of the first principle. Again, the businessman gets punched and he spits blood, as Blondie reminds him that a parent's command is absolute. The businessman falls to the floor and Blondie steps away for a moment. Efficiency is most important when working, and the businessman says that Blondie cannot do the same thing twice. The villain smiles, saying that he knew that he should have taken proper care of Blondie and the shop owner. The businessman swore that next time, he would kill all of them for sure. However, Blondie informs him that he is spouting some useless things. This is because the third principle says that if there is a possibility of parents being in danger, the danger should be taken care of. Blondie points the gun over his shoulder and shoots down the chandelier, which breaks and falls to the businessman lying underneath. As Blondie leaves, he mutters like father, like son, and scowls in irritation that attacker Joe is so much like his father. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, attacker Joe is receiving a drip and the nurse asks if the patient feels uncomfortable anywhere. As usual, attacker Joe swears and groans that it should be obvious. The nurse says that she heard that school violence is really scary these days. This was the first time that someone had gotten this hurt, and the nurse guessed that the guy that hit attacker Joe had been really good at fighting. Still, the damage was too much, and the patient admitted that it indeed hurt a lot. However, the nurse raised herself and asked what he and his father had been talking about earlier. She asks about the three principles since that was mentioned before. Meanwhile, attacker Joe's attention is focused on the drip, which looks a weird color. She tells him that he has nothing to worry about, and she smiles that he will not die if she only uses half. Then, the sexy nun trainer whips off her black wig with a dark glint in her eyes. She was Rachel, a dead mansion trainer. Her responsibility and speciality was disguise and undercover work, as well as interrogation and torture. The nun Rachel calls the director and informs him that they have a problem. The sexy trainer explains that the weapon codenamed Sean had exerted force. The director then leaps to his feet in shock and confusion, asking the nun to explain. The sexy trainer further explains that they tracked down the boy and had arrived at the scene. But he was already gone, leaving behind a pile of seriously injured adult men at the scene. Even if it was their special weapon, it should have been impossible because of the three absolute principles. The director was concerned, saying that this news did not make sense as nothing like this had ever happened in the history of their dead mansion. That was why it was called the three absolute principles. He called the sexy trainer and told her that if the boy was indeed breaking the rules, then something was wrong. The weapons they sold at the dead mansion could ignore their commands and turn at them if that was the case, so he changed the objective. The director instructed that the sexy trainer must first investigate Sean. She was to observe him closely and find out if he really used force without permission. The nun agreed, and if she needed any support in Korea, she was told to seek the aid of the white tiger workforce that strolled in the form of a really big guy and a really skinny guy. The big guy could not believe that all the damage had been done by a middle schooler, and the thin guy laughed that sorting the situation would make his hair fall out. The sexy trainer relayed to the director that she had already met up with the smoker and the barcode head, so she would start observing him after she left the scene. The thin guy points out that he only heard barcodes and he wonders what that means. However, the sexy trainer walks right past the two men, her focus on her phone. The bigger guy scoffs at what kids call clothes because the nun is dressed in bodacious body-hugging black. The thin guy smiles that the trainer is said to be Russian, and that Russians are open-minded. He also adds that his wife was open-minded. By the way, their manager was always out at times like this, and he asks if the manager was still in menopause, but the boss had just given him other work to do. Meanwhile, at the high school where students flock in and out of, the sexy trainer has already finished her preliminary investigation on him. She knows that he attends a middle school there, and that his parents were abroad on paper. However, those parents were actually unidentified fake parents, and she wondered exactly what their special weapon was doing in a school like this. She plans to dig it all up, and the sexy trainer grins with wicked delight as an evil smile crosses her face. She is once again in the black wig disguise, and she is excited to see what he grew up to be. Our dude had been the best of all the children that she had taught, and he wielded every weapon she had taught him so perfectly. She cannot believe that he grew independent of a mission, and the trainer smiles when she finally locates our dude's classroom. She peeks in and she finds out dude gossiping to his classmates about attacker Joe, and he pulled a silly face, mocking the bully's begging. The trainer was flabbergasted, in great disbelief and even greater shock. She could not believe that vulgar child was supposed to be her star pupil. Meanwhile, our dude was still happily gossiping about how he had told Joseph Kwon not to act cocky or he would really die. Finally, the dude napping behind him groaned and complained that our dude Blondie was so noisy. The large boy cursed and said that he just wanted to sleep, and Blondie immediately asked the large boy if he had cursed. The large boy glared at Blondie, who glared back at him, and the trainer watched curiously from the window, wondering if a hierarchical fight was taking place. There had been times like that at the Dead Mansion as well, and often the children fought to establish a hierarchy of strength. It was adorable how they would even try to fight her. Every time the children fought, Sean always came out the strongest, so she was sure that this time would be no different. However, to her absolute shock, she sees him get beat by the large boy. She stares in confusion, wondering what happened to him. The hope leaves the trainer's eyes as she watches her prized pupil cry out in pain and whine his apologies. Her face twisted in disgust, like she was smelling something very bad just by watching the scene. Later, class began, and the language teacher had the students look at the next paragraph. That's right, it was a school and she was the language teacher. She figured that her special boy could not show off his strength if he was trying to hide his identity. The trainer wondered if this meant that their genius was still under the influence of the three principles. She decided to observe a little longer and was surprised to see him staring at his book with such intensity. Those eyes and that focused gaze, she had guessed that he was different and was elated to see a change. At Dead Mansion, the good kids were not only strong but also intelligent, and special codename Sean was always the most outstanding child. The trainer chuckled, thinking that he could hide his power, but there was no way he could hide his brilliance. The trainer giggled to herself, thinking that he ought to at least try to conceal this much if he was trying to blend in, and she thought of teaching our dude about that once she had a chance. However, her teaching zeal quickly died away when she saw the goofy comics he was drawing on his school books. She stared in great disappointment and disbelief once more. Finally, she raged and demanded what he was doing when he was in class. She whacked the top of his head soundly. Later, in the staff restroom, the sexy trainer let her head fall into her hands as she groaned in defeat. She could not believe that their perfect child had become such a stupid child, and the thought was so vexing that she ripped apart her whole disguise with her bare hands. It was strange to the trainer, because the boy's face was a match, but she could sense a single shroud of elegance in him. She tries to think that it was all a coincidence, but our guy's awful drawings come back to haunt, and she clutches her head in horror. The trainer could not believe in any way that such an immature kid was her star pupil. In her frustration, she changed her plans on the spot and hopped down from the toilet. It was no longer a matter of protecting the three absolute principles, and she first had to find out if that boy was truly the special weapon they had been searching for. So, she emerged from the bathroom dressed as a student. Meanwhile, our dude stumbles home, rubbing at his head and groaning in pain. He mumbles that the teacher usually did not hit that hard, but the trainer tails him and swears to end his life if he is not the child that she is searching for. Blondie suddenly stops when someone calls his name, and he turns when Hyuno's mom approaches. She smiles and says that he came at just the right time, and she asks if he will help her carry these. The principles activate in him once more and he rushes to help her with the bags. The mother thanks him and tells him to eat some tteokbokki while he is at her shop. Blondie beams and thanks her happily for the food, while the trainer in disguise keeps trailing them. They get to the tteokbokki shop, and he happily pigs out on the tteokbokki. The mother laughs to see him eating so fast and tells him to eat slowly, and he agrees. Meanwhile, the trainer notes that she had heard about the old woman from Attacker Joe. The trainer was aware that Attacker Joe had put the old woman's son into a coma. However, she wondered what Shin's relationship was with the old woman. Meanwhile, Blondie had started to eat real slowly, and the sexy trainer was double disgusted by how vulgar he was. The closer she looked, the more vulgar Blondie got. The trainer refused to accept that he was her star pupil, and she could not imagine how someone so vulgar could have her star student's face. She laughed sharply and both the mother and our dude glanced at her. The trainer coughed, fanning her hand over her mouth, and said that the food was so spicy that she begged for water. The old woman quickly pulled out some water and laughed that the young girl could not handle spice very well. The trainer happily gulped down the water, but she did not think this was about handling spice, and she thought that the food was torture. The sexy trainer could not believe that people willingly ate that kind of thing. She thought that Koreans were crazy, and that this much should be considered poison or assassination. Blondie smiled and said that she should have eaten slowly. He also laughed that she was rather clumsy. The sexy trainer immediately took those words personally, especially since they came from the vulgar kid that she had sworn to kill. Now that she thinks about it, her star pupil could not handle spicy food, and she used to hold his hand tightly back then. The sexy trainer felt so bad for her star student, sure that he was having a rough time if he was still in Korea. However, she paused in confusion when she noticed Blondie's hand shaking. The old woman happily asked Blondie if the food was good and he happily admitted that it was delicious. That is when the trainer realized that Blondie might actually be holding back. She thought it was foolish of him to eat it if that was the case, and she wondered why he was forcing himself to eat everything served to him. The trainer figured that it made sense not to eat if the boy was having such a hard time. However, she froze when she realized something. She recalled the time the old woman had asked for help with her bags, as well as the time when the old woman had asked our dude to eat some tteokbokki. Every time the woman asked for something, the boy listened. Again, the old woman asked for help, and the blonde boy happily helped her. The trainer stared in realization that the boy was obedient to the old woman, and that would mean that the three absolute principles were still functional. Someone might have ordered her star pupil to destroy Byungwook instructions, and the only person who could have done that is the happy old owner of the snack shop. Dead Mansion's first principle said that the parents' words were absolute. This meant that their star student recognized this old woman as his parent and listened to her orders. Once the trainer assumed this, everything suddenly made sense. The trainer asked for the bill and the mother asked for a moment to go find some change. There was a very simple way for the sexy trainer to verify her suspicion, and she pulled out a sharp piece of wood. She flung that wood at the old shopkeeper while her back was turned, and the wood was instantly caught by a fork. Blondie had appeared, jumping right over the counter, and the sexy trainer beamed with absolute joy to see that her star student was still functional. A bar stool fell over and the old woman gasped, saying that she had been surprised. However, when she straightened, she could no longer see Shinor, the nice young lady from earlier who had left behind her change. This was because in a completely different street, our dude and the sexy trainer was brawling. She was elated to see that he was following the third principle for good children, and he blocked all of her attempts of attack, the same way she blocked his attacks as well. Our dude grabbed her arm and growled in the trainer's face, telling to get it over with. He asked if she was planning to follow him around all day, when he had already figured out who she was. Her eyes sparkled with demonic joy and she acknowledges him by his codename, saying that it had been a while. Rachel is absolutely elated to see her perfect killing machine again. Still, she does think that it is a little strange and she asks why he is following around that old woman from the snack shop like she is his parent. There was no way such a shabby snack shop owner could be a client of a dead mansion, and our dude mutters that he has no idea what she is talking about. Our dude had caused a fuss, but he had not expected to be found out so quickly. Whatever the case, the sexy trainer disguised as a young girl swept her leg to destabilize our dude and threw him over her shoulder, thus slamming him to the ground in a wrestling knockout. He groaned from where he lay on the floor, and the trainer settled on top of him, telling our dude that it was time to go back. The trainer smiled with a proud and evil glint in her eyes, saying that there were many clients waiting for him. Blondie considered her words and thought of going back. This would mean going back to the life that he had before, where he beat up various other students. Suddenly, a memory flashes in our dude's mind and he recalls someone calling out to him and calling our dude Park Shin. A woman covered in blood had given him that name, and his eyes widened as he wondered what that memory was. The sexy trainer asked what he had seen, but our dude's eyes hardened instead. He slammed his head against the head of the pretend student trainer, and she fell back with a groan. She called out to him and glared with rage in her eyes as she wiped her nose, seeing that he would not come back quietly. However, by the time she looked up, she had found that he was gone. Meanwhile, our dude had beat it out of there like he had wild dogs on his tail, and he could not believe that they had sent the super sexy deadly trainer after him. The memory of the bloody woman once again flashed in Blondie's mind, but he had no idea who that was. Later, the director got a call and he was very shocked. He could not believe that the sexy trainer had lost their prize. She apologized to him, explaining that she had let her guard down for only a moment. However, she had found that the old woman who had been controlling the special boy with the three principles. The director was surprised to hear this news, and the trainer continued to narrate the story as she shrugged off her high school clothes. From what she had observed, Sean seems to consider that woman his parent, and the director realized that their weapon kid was following the words of the old woman that he recognized as his parent. The director had not even realized it was possible. He asked the trainer if the old woman was intentionally using the three principles. However, the trainer admitted that she needed more confirmation, but what she'd seen so far, it did not seem likely. So, the director scratched his chin and told the trainer to check on that woman first. Meanwhile, a lady in the clothing shop wanted to scold the sexy trainer for cutting in line. But the woman who emerged from behind the curtain was much older and even sexier. The woman was shocked because she could have sworn that it was a young lady who walked into the dressing room. Anyway, the trainer knew of 2 ways to retrieve a good child from their parents. The old woman who owned the snack shop was shocked when a fancy older-looking woman approached her. Of course, it was the sexy trainer in disguise, and she asked the old woman to stay away from our dude. The sexy trainer was posing as our dude's mom, and she said that she was often away on business trips, so she had not been able to pay much attention to him. However, the fake mother could not believe that her son, who could not even eat spicy food, had been eating such low-quality food. As a parent, the trainer said that it broke her heart, and the old woman hung her head in shame. She apologized as she had not realized that the boy could not eat spicy food. The first way to retrieve a good child from their parents was to make the parent voluntarily give up their ownership of the child. The disguised trainer smiled because she wanted the old woman to feel guilt, because she did not think the old woman was worthy of parenting our dude. The trainer went on to say that she knew that her son listened to the snack shop owner, but she had to take responsibility as an adult. So, if her fake son ever showed up there again, the disguised trainer told the old woman to tell our dude to never come back again, and to go back home. This would force our dude to go back to the dead mansion, and she wanted the old woman to tell him that with confidence. The trainer started walking away, feeling satisfied that things would go her way. However, to her surprise, the old woman immediately rejected her suggestion. The sexy trainer turned in surprise and stared at the old woman. The old woman knew that the fake parent was often away on business trips. The trainer asked if the old woman was going to nitpick about that. However, the old woman asked the fake mother if she had ever properly looked at her son's face or clothes. She asked if the fake mother knew how hard our dude's school life was. Blondie always wore messy clothes and had a dirty face, and whenever she asked him about it, he always said he fell somewhere. The old woman had always thought that was true, and that Blondie was a boy who was growing up like others. However, her own dear son had always said that he fell down as well, and she cried as she recalled that her son was in the hospital now. So, the old woman could not bear to let Blondie end up like that. So, without realizing it, she had started looking after him whenever she could. Right now, the poor boy needed a parent to watch over him. That is what the old woman thought. She could not have him end up like her dear son. And if the other mother was busy, then she would happily watch over Blondie. The trainer was horrified to hear this and yelled that the old woman had no right to watch over her son. However, the old woman just bows to her, apologizing that she cannot comply with the woman's requests. The sexy trainer grits her teeth in frustration and rage, and she calls the director once more, telling him that the first attempt failed. The old woman was more stubborn than the trainer had expected her to be, and the new mother had insisted on her ownership. The director then sighed that it could not be helped, and that he had wanted to resolve the situation quietly if possible. Unfortunately, there was no choice but to proceed with the second method, which greatly delighted the sadistic sexy trainer. There was a second way to retrieve a good child from their parent, and the sexy trainer tugged at her clothes as she eagerly considered the method. In the event of the parent's death, the good child was to go back to the mansion. The sexy trainer happily switched back her outfit to look young once more, and she set the old woman as her target, for it was her joy to get rid of the new mother. Meanwhile, at a convenience store, the old woman happily shops for some vegetables. The sexy trainer has in her hands a very suspicious-looking weapon. She is upset that the old woman took their prized child for them, and she eagerly wants to punish her. The sexy trainer presses down on the detonator in her hands, and a bomb starts to beep where she planted it. Suddenly, the convenience store explodes, and the sprinklers go off as the shoppers cry out, asking what is going on. The old woman is shocked and terrified, and the sexy trainer aims her gun at her. She declares that the old woman cannot become her prized child's parent, and that she will not allow it. She fires at the old woman, but at the same time, Blondie comes swinging by with a frying pan and knocks the bullet back. He glares at the sexy trainer with the promise of death in his eyes, and she grins in joy to see him in action. Blondie admits that he saw it in a game and decided to give it a shot. He could not believe that the dented pan had proved a decent defense against a bullet. Then, he tossed the pan aside, admitting to the trainer that he had suspected she would try something like this. Bombs and guns were way too over the top for an old woman, as anyone with common sense would know. The sexy trainer told him not to interfere, and that she would free him from that old woman. However, our dude could not let that happen, and he raced forward. He slammed against the shelf to bring it down on the trainer, and she sped away, cursing because the third principle had activated. He kicked the gun right out of her hand before she could even fire it, and our dude reminded her of the third principle, which she knew without him even having to say it. The trainer glared, saying that she wanted to take him back unharmed, and she swiped her knife at him with the intention to maim. Blood dripped to the floor, but it turned out to be just tomato juice, and our dude swore with rage in his eyes that he did not think he could let Rachel leave unharmed. After all, she had just threatened his mother. He flung the can of tomato sauce away and then continued to fight, kicking out at the sexy trainer. The trainer asked if he really thought that he could take her down, when she had been the one to teach him all of his moves. He fell as she tossed him with her sexy legs, telling our dude that fighting should be a means to an end. That was a supplementary lesson, and our dude groaned in pain. The trainer smiled and asked him to tell her what was the purpose of this fight. Meanwhile, the old woman remained in the convenience store, confused about what was going on. She turned when she saw a little boy crying for his mother. The lady came closer, asking the poor child if he was hurt, and the child went on crying that he could not see his mother. He cried that he had no idea where his mother had gone, and he begged the old woman for help while pulling a knife out from behind him. The trainer told our dude that it was time for a supplementary lesson, and she asked him what was the point of this fight. He stared in confusion at her for a moment, then rolled out of the way when she stabbed a knife into the place where he had just been. Our dude leapt up as the trainer came charging at him once again, and he dodged her sharp thrusts. Blondie managed to block her arm and asked her about a plan, and she congratulated him. It was a plan to free him, and she kept struggling to escape his hold. That is when our dude's eyes widened in realization. The trainer reminded him that he should not be distracted in the middle of a fight, and he barely managed to dodge her next hit. Our dude stumbled on his feet, and he groaned as he grabbed some cans of food. As expected, fighting the lady with bare hands was just too much, and he flung a can at the grinning psycho trainer. She laughed that as long as they could take care of the old woman, he would be back under the dead mansion's command. After all, the children were their products in the end, and our dude was confused to hear that he was a product. The nun lunged at him with a mad grin, saying that it was time for them to go back home together, but he flung a bag of flour at her and ripped it open. White powder exploded, blocking the view of everyone present, and the crazy trainer had to fall back with a groan. She cursed as she covered her nose to keep from inhaling the flour. Suddenly, our dude lunged out of the makeshift smoke screen and sniped her hair with a pair of scissors. She fell back and he twirled scissors in his hands like he was a ninja. The fierce battle continued between the two trained killers, and the nun laughed madly, saying that he was acting right. He was now acting like the boy that she knew. The trainer blocked his scissors with her knife, however she paused for some reason in slight shock and alarm. He was not even budging no matter how much she pushed against him. Our dude reminded her that she had called them products, as he grabbed the trainer and threw her away in a vicious tumble. The sexy trainer got tossed into a shopping cart, and she groaned in anger and frustration. However, Blondie asked what more he was going to get. He was supposed to go to a place where his family was waiting, but the family did not call each other products. Speaking of products, he kicked her cart away and the trainer rolled down the aisle, slamming into the shelf at the end. He locked the cart in place and walked away from her, saying that she was more of a product than they were because the trainer was stuck in a shopping cart. The sexy trainer cried out to him as he walked away, crying desperately for him to return. Meanwhile, the kind old lady approached a crying child and asked if he was okay. The child pulled a knife out from behind him, and as she turned to ask if his parents were around, he planned to jab her in the chest with the knife. Suddenly, Blondie skidded into appearance and called out to the old woman, calling her mother and asking if she was okay. She was surprised to see him, and the child with the knife hesitated. The new mother scolded him, telling him that he should be in class right now. She also asked about his torn-up clothes and asked if he had gotten hurt again. However, the child's eyes fell to Blondie and he recognized the face of the legend of the dead mansion, the undefeated child called Sean. Since the boy had appeared, the child wondered if this meant that trainer Rachel had been defeated. The child continued to pretend to cry and Blondie finally asked whose child it was. His new mother explained that the child said that he had lost his mom, so they should take him out so that the child could find his mother. Our dude smiled and bent to the child, asking the little boy if he remembered his parents' number. The boy was hesitant and admitted that he did not know his parents' phone number. Taking on Sean was too much of a risk, so the child decided to just focus on the target. The child raced for the old woman, asking her to help him look for his mother. The child planned to use the old woman's mother's instinct to get close to her. However, our dude's face had gone dark and he placed a gentle hand on the child's shoulder. Blondie picked up the child, telling him that there was no need to cry. Our dude then leaned closer to the child's ear and whispered a question, asking the boy if he had not learnt that dumb-looking kids would be hated. The boy froze immediately, knowing that he had been found out. Blondie pointed a finger gun at the child's neck and the boy froze. Our dude commanded the little boy in his arms to stay very still. Our dude also added that he would need to have a conversation with the director. He was sure that the boy still had it, since our dude had already lost the direct line to the director a long time ago. The little boy nervously said that he had no idea what our dude was talking about, and our dude gave him a sharp chop to make him drop the knife, scolding the child for carrying such things. The old woman turned in surprise, asking our dude if he had heard something. But Blondie just smiled, saying that he had heard nothing. Then, he pretended that the child in his arms had fallen asleep, saying that he must be pretty tired. He wondered just where the boy's mother could be. Then he noticed that the child had a phone, so he would use the phone to try calling someone. The director got a call and his phone began to ring. The tattooed director rose from his bed and groaned that it was much too early for anyone to call him. He rose and pulled his garments down, getting dressed and groaning about telling them not to call him on his direct line. The director answered the phone, and our dude said hello. The director froze, a shaky smile crossing his face as he recognized that voice. He recognized the voice of his prize pupil called Sean, and the director asked why the prize was calling through this number. Our dude went on to say that the director had sent a huge present for him, and he asked if the director had thought that he would be caught by just Rachel and a kid. The director was surprised to hear that both the sexy trainer and the boy called Eugene had lost. Our guy left, saying that the director's reaction hurt his pride. Then, Blondie adds that no matter who the director sends, the results will be the same, and that the director can keep trying if he wants to. The director laughed that he had thought the boy had only just run away, but he never expected that their prize was planning on fighting the dead mansion head-on. Our guy laughed that the director's joke was not even funny. If there was a threat to the parents' safety, his instructions were to ignore the principals and to resolve the situation. According to the third principle, the dead mansion had tried to hurt his mother, so he would consider the dead mansion a threat and break through the current situation. The director fell to his knees and his diamond teeth twisted in an evil laugh, and he laughed that the present that the Lord had blessed him with was purer and more beautiful than anything he had ever seen. The director had not expected that our dude would be so faithful to the three principles, and he is in awe of it. So, the director agrees to our dude's demands and asks him to send the little boy Eugene back to the dead mansion. The director says that if they get back Eugene, then they will not touch the old woman. So, our dude tells Rachel to come by herself after 1 hour to retrieve the little boy. The director grins as the phone call ends and he is so relieved. He could not believe that their prize pupil would be so pure, and he hoped that they would reunite soon. Meanwhile, our dude pokes the head of the sleeping boy, telling him to wake up. The boy is startled awake and immediately goes into defense mode. but our dude tells him not to even bother looking for the knife since he took that away a long time ago. He told the boy to sit quietly and eat since the kid was probably hungry. The boy stared in confusion, wondering who on earth could ever eat that cheap food. However, to his shock, he ended up cleaning the whole plate. Our dude laughed that the food had tasted good, though the little boy tried to deny it. Our dude grinned that the little boy had happily eaten everything on his plate, so his denial was unbelievable. Finally, they came to a stop and Rachel had appeared. She looked like an angry avenging angel from where she stood glaring at Sean. However, she called for Eugene and told the little boy to come to her. The nervous little boy agreed to her command and headed over to meet her. However, our dude stopped him and told him to take some food back with him. Blondie smiled that the child seemed to like the food, but the sexy trainer glared in disgust at seeing him so relaxed. She admitted that she had not given up on him just yet. The sexy trainer promised to visit him soon, and she did not touch the food that he had offered. Our dude insisted that the child was at an age where he should be eating tons, but she ignored him. The sexy trainer muttered that things would have gone so much easier if Eugene had just taken care of the old woman. The young child tried to apologize. However, the trainer informed the child that he would be disposed of. The trainer mutters that they should have gotten rid of useless children a long time ago, and the little Eugene goes still from shock and fear. The little boy trembles and tries to apologize as fear clouds his heart. But our dude has already turned around and he calls to the child. Our dude smiles and raises the bag of food to the little boy and says that he will ask one last time. Blondie asked the child if the food had tasted good. The little boy stared at him in confusion, with a tear in his eyes, and he shakily admitted that the food had been good as he cried big fat tears. Blondie smiled and agreed that Hyunho's place was really good. So, he asked the child to come back with him to Hyunho's snack shop. The ownership rights of the dead mansion's good children belong to the buyers, the parents. However, in the event of a parent's death, the ownership of the child immediately reverted back to the dead mansion. Eugene was a young child owned by the dead mansion, and he was the child from the first chapter. A woman had introduced herself as his mother, and he had accepted. When a child was returned to Dead Mansion, they were often readopted. He was again sent to another family, and once again, he lost his parents. Once again, he was readopted and sent to a new family, and once again that parent died. No matter what family they sent Eugene to, the parents eventually came to an unfortunate end. The director spoke to the little boy, asking him how many times it had been already. The young body explained that it was the 4th time that he had lost a parent, and the director groaned that it had been a rhetorical question. Of course, they could continue to profit by repeatedly sending the boy to new families, but he had failed to protect his parents 4 times already. The young boy's record was the worst disgrace in the history of their dead mansion. If this continued, they would have no choice but to eventually dispose of the little boy. The little boy was well aware of what happened to children who were disposed of, and the many grave markers behind him further emphasized that. The boy needed to become someone useful or he would end up in the cemetery like the many other failed children before him. The director told the little boy that he would once again be given an opportunity, and he was to go to Korea to help retrieve their star pupil. If the little boy did not want to be disposed of, then he had to prove his value. However, the little boy had failed and the sexy trainer informed him that he would now be disposed of. The little boy froze as she added that this was why they should have gotten rid of useless kids from the beginning. The little boy was in shock as he stared at Rachel, realizing that he would be disposed of because he was considered useless. He was terrified and he so desperately wanted to prove his worth. The child tried to beg the sexy trainer to give him one more chance. However, she was just about done listening to his excuses and had no interest in providing such an opportunity. The little boy had tears in his eyes as he shakily apologized, unaware of our dude walking up behind them. Our dude asked the little boy one more time if the tteokbokki had been tasty. However, Rachel smiled wickedly and said that she would be giving the little boy one last chance. The little boy's mission was to kill Sean's parents, the old woman. Eugene had been given a final chance to prove his worth, so he put all that he had into proving that he could be useful. He cried dramatically that the food had tasted really good, and he swore to kill the prize student's parents. So, our dude smirked and said that he would be taking back the little boy. Rachel grinned with joy that she was still being perceived as a threat, so the 3rd principle still applied to her. The sexy trainer grinned that they had a deal, and that she was supposed to collect the little boy as part of their deal. If he took back the little boy, she would have the right to target his mother. Blondie smirked and said that the kid himself had given spoken agreement. The child liked the food that he had eaten, and the little boy stared at our dude with such intensity. Our dude said that the child had now become one of their regulars at the shop, so he could not help it. The nun laughed that this was how our dude was going to be, so she smiled wickedly and told the little boy to go ahead, since this was his last chance. Rachel smirked as she let go of the little boy, saying that the deal was off and that she would go after the old woman again. Our dude smirked and told her to do as she pleased as he grabbed the little boy. Our dude easily swore that he would just beat her over and over again, no matter how many times she came at him. The little boy Eugene was nervous and he stared in awe at the fixed, determined look on our dude's face. Our dude agreed that he had definitely taken the child and he was prepared to defeat the sexy trainer no matter what it took. But now, he had no idea why the child was living in their house. The old woman laughed and asked our dude what he meant by asking such a question, and that our dude had said that he would take care of the child for a day. Still, our dude had not expected the kid to come to their house. The old woman assured them that it was fine, since she was sure neither of the two boys under her care could cook properly by themselves. She would not be bored either, so it was good for her. Besides, it was really fascinating to her to think that the kid's mom was a friend of our dude's mother. Blondie also laughed, considering both those fake mothers were one person called their trainer. So, the old woman was happy to have them both stay over since there was no one waiting for them at home. Blondie tried to insist that such a thing was not necessary, but the little boy bowed his head to thank her. The child could not miss this opportunity, and the old woman apologized that her mind was a mess because she had not asked the little boy his name. The child introduced himself as Eugene, and our dude thought that this was all really too much. Come to think of it, it was actually the first time that he had been inside the old woman's house, and he looked around at Hyunho's house. He noticed a pair of soaking wet sneakers at the balcony, and turned curiously. He noticed the empty chair in front of him, and he glanced at a door that led out of the room. Our dude asked if that was Hyunho's room, and his mom agreed that it was. She asked why he was asking, and our dude just asked if he could go in. Blondie had ended up speaking like he was entranced, and he opened the door and stared into Hyunho's room. It was an ordinary room, and the kind of room one would often see in dramas or movies, with the usual everyday life, with normal dreams and efforts. It was a normal home with a normal family, that kind of thing. Our dude figured that perhaps it was because he longed for it so much that he did not get it. Hyunho had a normal and ordinary family, and he should be the one in this room. He could have been happy, spending ordinary and normal times with his mother. Our dude stares deeply at the picture in his hands of Hyunho and his mother, and he knew that he should have not just stood by while the poor boy got bullied. Meanwhile, the little Eugene thanked the old woman for the meal. Now that our dude was gone, this was finally his chance. The little child said that the omelet was the best food that he had ever had, and the old woman was amused that he had called the rolled egg and omelet. The little boy had some questions for her, and she happily agreed to answer all his questions. The little boy asked if the old woman had any other family besides her son, and asked where her husband had gone. The old woman sighed deeply as she wondered how to explain it. But the heavens had really needed her son's father, so he had been taken away. Eugene mumbled that this meant that her husband had become a family member in the heavens, and the old woman clapped, saying that was a lovely way to put it. On the other hand, her son could not become part of a family anywhere, and the old woman is surprised by the boy's words. However, the little boy explained, with a notion of self-loathing, that a weak loser, a useless child, could not become anyone's family. The old woman was confused about what the little boy was talking about, and the child went on to say that a family was where a person constantly proved their worth and showed to each member that they were a valuable presence. If a person could not prove their worth, then they were just a hindrance that consumed resources. The little boy was very convinced, but the old woman rejected his definition. She said that was not what a family was like. The little boy stared at the surprised woman in confusion, and he asked her what a family was. She started to tell him, but our dude suddenly showed up and snatched Eugene up, asking the little boy if he was done eating. Then, Blondie carried the little boy away, while asking playfully if they could sleep in the living room. The old woman was surprised and pointed out that Hyunho's room was empty. She asked why they did not just sleep there. However, Blondie just rejoiced at seeing a sofa and said that it was good enough for him. As Blondie asked the kid to sleep on the floor, the old woman smiled just watching them. Later that night, in the home that three shared, Eugene was sulking terribly. He was upset that the older boy had really made him sleep on the floor, but he sat up when he noticed a crack of light coming from a slightly adjacent door. The door was compelling, so the little child could not resist. He got to his feet and peeked inside the room. There he found the old woman slumped and asleep on a desk. He thought that the old woman was very strange, and that she called such a useless kid her family. She had even smiled and made a warm expression to a stranger like him. The little child had not even proven anything of his worth to her, and he recalled the director's firm guiding words, reminding him to become someone useful. A useless child could not become anyone's family. That is what the director had told little Eugene. However, the old woman had yelled that their definition of a family was wrong, and the little boy wondered what a family was. He had to prove himself, so he reached for the gun hidden in his pants, and aimed it with shaky hands at the sleeping old woman. He had to become a family member that someone needed so that he would not be disposed of. However, Eugene was frozen in place with the gun drawn like he could not bring himself to take the final step. The door was gently closed, and our dude loomed over the frozen boy, asking him if this was the decision that the child had made in the end. In fear, Eugene raised his gaze to meet the unforgiving gaze of his senior from the dead mansion. Eugene had to prove himself. He had to prove his worth or else he would end up disposed. This was the driving point behind him pointing a gun towards the sleeping old woman. He had to become a family member that someone needed. However, the hall had suddenly gone dark and very dangerously quiet. The door in front of him was shut gently by a larger and stronger hand, and Blondie asked the little boy if this, trying to kill his chosen mother, was his decision in the end. Fearfully, the boy looked up and maliciously our dude looked down as he asked his question. The boy shakily said that he had just been fulfilling his mission, so he turned the gun on our dude and begged him to kindly not resist. The little boy was so small as he aimed his gun in the direction of our dude, and our dude did not even flinch. The boy was confused, and he could not understand why the bullet had not fired. Our dude had all the bullets in his hand, and he asked the little kid if he had gotten the gun from Rachel earlier. Blondie tossed the bullets to the ground and revealed that he had already emptied the entire gun while the little boy had slept. He also mentioned that Eugene was way too lax. 15 pounds of 9mm parabellum bullets weigh about 112.5 grams, and a skilled assassin should have at least noticed that the magazine was empty when he held the gun. It looked like the little boy was still just an amateur, and he raised his hand to attack. The little boy cursed and reached for his knife, but our dude easily halted that attack by grabbing his naughty little arm. Then he slammed the little kid's face right into the door. The boy tried to grip the handle, but our dude was not having that. Unfortunately, the door did open slightly and the little boy raced inside with the intention to kill, with Blondie hot on his heels. The boy skidded to a stop suddenly, and they both took note of the old woman who was deeply asleep at the table. Blondie hissed and called out to Eugene, telling him to calm down for a moment and to quiet down since he did not want the little boy to wake up the old lady. However, the little boy had other plans and glanced maliciously at the sleeping defenseless woman. It would be a cheap shot, but an opportunity was an opportunity, and Eugene lunged for it. Our dude cursed and raced after him. However, the little boy was not slick and our dude managed to rope his little leg inside a school tie. The little boy went crashing to the ground, and he glared in hate at the tie around his leg. The little crazy kid slashed the tie off his leg, which made Blondie fall back. Little Crazy called out to the older and more experienced assassin, and our dude glared back, telling the kid that he had a scary look on his face, though Blondie's face was much scarier as he tightened his hold on the tie. The little boy dug his feet into the sheets of the bed and used the force to propel himself up as he lunged at the older boy. Sean was ready for him, and as Eugene approached with his own weapon in hand, our dude received him and easily blocked his attack. Little Crazy got knocked back by the older boy and the little boy skidded to a halt while the old woman went on sleeping. Finally, the little boy asked what the older boy was doing. He realized that our dude was definitely going easy on him. The younger boy screamed in rage and he demanded that our dude fight him properly, lunging at him with the knife. However, our dude expertly dodged that. Finally, our dude shrugged and figured that he would fight the little kid for real, and he started by snatching away his knife. The little boy was so shocked, but he then threw his second weapon at the sleeping old woman. However, our dude skidded into view, his fingers balled into a fist as he charged at the rolling weapon. He swept his leg under the little boy's feet, easily destabilizing the footing of the shocked Eugene. However, before the kid could hit the ground, our dude easily caught him. Blondie mocked him, saying that Eugene could not make any noise, and with a dark and scary look on his face, he commanded the kid to get back up. They had not even started their new dance yet and the little kid's eyes were flooded with apprehension. He could not believe that large gap in the difference between him and the dead mansion's legend called Sean. The little boy groaned, but our dude insisted that he get to his feet, and told the little boy that his attacks were way too obvious. He told Eugene to launch his attacks again, just to get slammed in the head by a rolled-up magazine. The old woman had finally woken up and she was horrified to see our dude bullying the little boy. She yelled and asked what they were doing, and if they were fighting. Our dude quickly tried to explain that it was not like that, but she was not having it. As our dude tried to placate his mother, the little rat Eugene saw the distraction as an opening. However, immediately sensing his dark intentions, Sean glanced back at him with murder in his eyes and commanded the little boy to stop. Blondie then happily laughed and pulled Eugene into a hug, saying that they were not fighting, and this was just their morning workout. Even the little boy nervously muttered that him twirling around the weapon in his hand was also just a trick. The little boy had realized that he just could not win in this situation, and that he did not have the confidence to kill that old woman in front of Sean. Our dude laughed so easily and treated the kid like he was not even a threat. The old woman did not really believe they had been doing a workout and was sure that our dude had been bothering him, but he insisted that he had just been playing with the little boy. Meanwhile, Eugene remained analyzing the situation and seeing that a head-on confrontation was impossible. However, the old woman suddenly turned to the little child, much to his surprise as he was jolted out of his thoughts. She told him not to make fun of his brother too much, and that such was not the appropriate behavior between families. Eugene was shocked to hear those words, and he lowered his head at being called family again. He hesitantly asked if he was a part of this family, and the old woman smiled, saying that they ate together and slept together under the same roof. She knelt by the little boy while our dude kept an eagle eye on Little Crazy, and the old woman said that all of them living together meant that they were no different from a family. She patted the head of the little boy who seemed suddenly lost in thought. As our dude surveyed the scene between the old woman and the little boy, his gaze softened slightly. Meanwhile, while such a happy moment was being shared, a dark shadow arrived at their door. Suddenly, all three heard a knock on the door, and a voice called out to ask if anyone was home. The old woman could not help but wonder who could be at their door at this hour, and she pushed open the door and asked, with surprise and curiosity, who was at their door. The young girl with slightly blonde hair bowed before them. She apologized for coming so early in the morning, but she introduced herself as Eugene's sister, Mary, with a big and bright smile on her face. She looked like a little angel, and she happily thanked the old woman for taking care of her little brother the other night, so she had come to greet the woman herself. Then, our dude popped up to ask his new mom who was at the door, and his mother explained that the strange lady had said that she was Eugene's sister, so she must have come to pick him up. Our dude of course was very skeptical when he saw the lady at the door, and he asked if she really was the person that she claimed to be. Blondie swaggered out the door, amused to learn that the little boy had a sister, and he asks her why she came. She happily responds that she came to get her little brother, of course. She smiled that in return for her little brother, they would guarantee the mother's safety since that was the promise after all, and of course, the fake sister had been sent by the dead mansion. However, the blonde stepped real close to the young lady, towering over her, and he asked her who exactly gave the order to the child to kill his mother. The young lady giggled and told our dude not to worry, since that was just Rachel's arbitrary order. Besides, our dude had caught him so everything was fine. However, Blondie was not buying her fake act of peace and he told her to first get rid of the knife at her thigh before he could believe her fake statement of peace. She giggled, saying that he was so quick to notice that she was armed. However, the fake sister assured our dude that as long as he cooperated, then nothing would happen. Our dude made a mocking face and pretended to be so scared, and he asked exactly what would happen if he refused to cooperate. Suddenly, Eugene showed up and shouted out with surprise and joy to see his sister, asking why she had taken so long to get there. He rushed into the arms of the other girl, much to the surprise of our dude and the old lady. Blondie admitted that siblings looked close and the new mother was touched, agreeing that he was right about how close they looked. Unfortunately, it looked like Little Crazy had once again failed in his mission, and he had been unable to kill the old woman. The director would be greatly disappointed in Eugene, who continued to fail in all of his tasks, and the fake sister continued to whisper that the boy might end up discarded for real this time. Meanwhile, the old woman gushed about Mary and Eugene having such pretty names. Our dude called to the little boy who had frozen. However, Eugene whispered to the fake sister and asked what she was saying, when she had been the one to barge in here and ruin his entire plan. She snickered in amusement and asked what plan he had. The little boy stepped back and glared at his fake sister, and he told her that he was an amateur. So, he had been searching for an opportunity to win over this family. The fake sister with the round glasses giggled and asked the little boy if he was making excuses. However, he told his fake sister not to be absurd, since the mission was neither straightforward nor simple. The man before them was the dead mansion's legend called Sean, and he guarded the old lady like a dragon guarding treasure. Blondie looked pretty menacing in that moment as he told his mother to wait inside, although she insisted on staying to say goodbye to Eugene. Eugene went on to say that Blondie was ugly, stupid, and his face was similar to that of a monkey's. Our dude could hear the entire conversation and he was heated at the child's words. However, the child also admitted that he had fought our dude head on, and found that he was extremely strong. Even Mary had to agree with his assessment, especially the description of our dude's face, which got Blondie even more heated to hear them talk, and he insisted that his mom head inside so that he could have a good talk with the two kids. The girl smiled and apologized to Little Crazy for ruining his mission, and that she would admit it this time. However, she assured him that they had another mission lined up for him, so the little boy was advised to withdraw for now and to take her hand. The little boy agreed and accepted Mary's hand. The fake sister then told the other two that they would be on their way, and the old lady was sad to see them go. Our dude stayed watching the proceedings, as the fake sister waved goodbye and said till next time. However, little Eugene was eager to leave and his head was hung in defeat. Suddenly, the old woman rushed outside and called to the little boy. She smiled and told him that he could come again another time, and that she would make him an egg roll, no, an omelet. The little boy turned to look at her, and a small smile graced his lips. He promised to come back as he left with his sister. As our dude watched them leave, the mother happily said that if Blondie ever brought the little boy over again, then she would make something delicious. So, our dude agreed and said that he would make sure to bring the little boy over again. Later, at Hyunho's school, the principal broke some news to his mom. The principal apologized for breaking the news like this, but they were going to discuss the punishments for the perpetrators with the school violence committee, so the discussion was a bit delayed. The perpetrators' parents promised to pay compensation, and all the perpetrators would get suspended. The woman understood, so the principal handed her a file containing the pictures of the people who had been bullying her son. The man asked if it would be better for her to see the pictures, so the woman collected the file, but her eyes widened in shock. She could not believe it, and asked why one of the pictures was there. She asked why Shin, the boy she had been taking care of all this while, was listed among the people bullying her son. Later, back at the dead mansion, the director bows his head and asks how this situation was allowed to happen. He queries Rachel, and the sexy trainer nun admits through the phone that she has no excuse to give the director. She had ordered a Little Crazy to kill the old woman, and the boy in question had his head bowed as he stood behind her. Honestly, the sexy trainer said that Eugene had turned out to truly be a useless child who could not even carry out a single order properly. However, that was not what the director was asking, and the little boy remained kneeling as the confused nun then asked what exactly had the director so vexed. The director had told the sexy trainer to retrieve Eugene, and not to bother that old woman anymore. Instead, she had disobeyed the director and ordered the little boy to kill the old woman. The train froze and tried to defend herself. However, the director considered Rachel to be the one who failed to follow orders properly, and he was very disgusted by her behavior. The nun still tried to defend herself, saying that she had done it all to retrieve their prized child, while Mary happily enjoyed herself in the background. However, the director said that he held promises in very high regard, and before the divine. Only faith and trust should exist between people. Only faith and trust were strong enough to come before God, according to the twisted teachings of the mad director of Dead Mansion. Anything after faith and trust was heresy to him, and because the children they raised lacked faith, they had no choice but to create the three principles as a means of control. The director then asked the nun to recall the consequences brought by unrestrained, spontaneous action. He then further asks the trainer if she understands that order, director, and promises are the absolute rules of Dead Mansion. The nun responded with an amen in prayer, with her head bowed. She then asked about retrieving their prized child, asking the director if he was really going to give up just like that. The director just told her not to worry about that, and that there were plenty of ways to solve the problem without even directly touching that old woman. Mary had already started the operation, and Eugene's fake sister cheekily sent, through different phones, pictures of Blondie bullying Huno to various chats. That day, our dude stepped out with a large and tired yawn, and he strolled through the halls, but was confused about why all the students were watching him nervously. He asked what was going on, and asked why the atmosphere was so tense. He even asked if there was an exam that day, but the other students were too scared to reply. Our dude pouted and asked why no one was answering his questions. However, the two large boys behind him finally spoke to him and they gaped at what they were looking at, and asked our dude if it was for real. Of course, our dude asked what they were talking about. One of the large dudes then turned a photo to him as it showed our dude strangling a struggling Huno. Our dude stared at the weird and crudely photoshopped picture and asked the dudes where they had gotten such a picture. All the dudes were silent for a moment as they looked at each other, as if deciding whether or not to answer that question. Finally, they made a decision and bowed their heads to him in apology, saying that they had been wrong all this time. Our dude was even further confused by this reaction. But the big dudes explained that they had heard rumors that Attacker Joe had actually been getting beaten up by our dude, and that Attacker Joe was like his lackey. Our dude was horrified to hear such an awful rumor and a blatant lie. The dudes went on to explain that the rumor had spread throughout the entire school, and that Attacker Joe was apparently too scared of him and bowed to him. Blondie could not believe that the students were eating up that kind of lousy rumor. The rumors got even worse and people were saying that our dude was friends with gangsters, and there was even a picture of our dude with a bunch of large wrestler-type dudes covered in tattoos, and Blondie yelled that fake picture was going too far. The rumors also said that Blondie had ordered Attacker Joe to crush Huno as well, and our dude was horrified by that rumor the most. He asked what the guys were talking about, and that it was not true, he had not done that. However, all the students refused to look him in the eye, and he was shocked. Our dude had completely been framed, even as he tried to explain that it was not like that. However, all the big guys thought that our dude was seriously cool, and they cheered him on. The dude tried to shove Blondie's seat partner aside and the boy made a small complaint. However, the large guy threatened the complaining dude, asking what he wanted. Raising his hand, the large bully asked if the boy also wanted to end up like Huno as well. However, our dude stopped the guy from bringing his hand down on the other boy. The large dude stared at Blondie in confusion, and our dude laughed, saying that he was really trying not to show off, and that no one knew about his hidden powers. Blondie offered to tell all the guys the full story if they followed him outside. The other students were hesitant as they watched them, and our dude glanced back at the wary students, concerned by how much they feared him. As they stepped outside, Blondie even asked the other dudes if they smoked, though he was not interested in that kind of thing. The dudes even asked why Blondie had asked. Once he was gone, the other students began to whisper, saying that they thought Shin was not that bad. However, the other students were not surprised to learn that birds of the same feather often flock together. Meanwhile, the other kids had headed outside, and our dude asked about the photos that had been shared in their group chat early in the morning. The dudes agreed that the person who shared the rumors had first dropped the photo of him bully Huno. The other students had responded with confusion and uncertainty, and the large dude explained that the person who dropped the photo then left the chat. Our dude immediately suspected that it was a trick from Dead Mansion, but he wondered why they would do something like that. Blondie groaned that once again he had been exposed, and he had wanted to attend the school quietly. Our dude sighed dramatically and wondered if there would be any schools willing to accept him after he transferred again. Then, Blondie told all the large dudes that it was his desire to graduate quietly, and that he had no intention of getting caught up in childish pranks. The ones that our dude had to deal with were not kids like them, and he shoved his hands in his pockets and strolled away, explaining that he was already looking at the world of adults. So, he told the dudes to make sure that this matter did not spread any further, and to keep it quiet at their end. The boys watched him go in awe and were touched that our dude considered them a part of his crew. They beamed and told him that he could just tell them what to do, and they would comply. However, the old woman happened to be passing by at that time, and she called out to her adopted son in confusion. She recalled seeing his picture at the principal's office and had yelled that Shin was not one of the boys who bullied her son. She insisted that the blonde was her son's friend and that there had to be some misunderstanding. The principal, however, pulled up a picture on his phone, and he showed the old woman the picture that had been circulated, saying that our dude was already infamous among the children. There was even a testimony that our dude often hung out with a friend named Joseph. The principal admitted that he was cautious about saying this, but he thought that Shin was definitely the instigator in the tragedy that befell her son. The old woman could not believe it, and the principal admitted that it was hard to contact the parents of the kid named Shin, and it seemed that our dude did not receive proper family education. From the principal's experience as an educator, he was sure that a child like Blondie could easily go astray, which was why he had called her and told her not to trust our dude too much. Meanwhile, our dude was exhausted and he wondered when those rumors would quiet down. Those large guys from class had a surprisingly naive side to them, and he wondered how they had seriously fallen for all those rumors. Our dude stopped for a moment and laughed to himself on the street. Then he called out to Mary, asking if he got her name right. She was surprised that he had called her, and she popped out from where she was hiding with a small laugh, realizing that she had not hidden herself well. He glared at her and said that if she was trying to hide, then she should have erased her coffee smell first. He had also perceived that scent in front of Hyuno's house last time as well, and the sly fox-faced fake sister laughed in awe that he could also catch a whiff of someone else's scent. She added that it made her feel a bit upset. Then, our dude asked Foxface what she wanted and why she was doing the weird thing of spreading rumors around when it was only making things complicated for other people. The girl laughed and said that our dude seemed to enjoy the rumors quite a lot. She even mimicked what he had said earlier to the bullies about how the ones that he had to deal with were not kids like them. He gritted his teeth in annoyance at her mocking tone, and she asked how he felt now that she had made him the top bully at school. Our dude was annoyed and yelled that he was not excited at all, and that he was already quite popular to begin with. The bespectacled girl laughed and said that making him popular was not the point, nor were the cold and harsh gazes of kids important to them. The eyes they had been aiming for were eyes filled with betrayal and contempt, and the little tech freak smiled wide, asking our dude if he had liked it and called him by his code name with a dark hint to her words. Blondie scratched his head and mumbled that he knew the photo was her doing. She beamed and asked him how it was, and that it was very well made. Blondie agreed that it was well made, but he had also been surprised by how crude the pictures had been, and the bespectacled girl beamed with pride. Our dude said that could not be enough to fool the general public. However, the fake sister thought that the pictures might be crude, given the tight schedule and limited resources, but our dude cut her off, saying that she was just making excuses. He laughed at her pathetic attempts to defend her work, so she stuck her hand in her bag in anger and grabbed the weapon hidden inside. Before our dude knew it, he had to abandon his school bag to dodge the barrage of bullets that she suddenly unleashed on him. He yelled at her once he was safely hidden behind a wall, and told her that she could not just take out a gun whenever she wanted. Blondie had heard that they wanted to retrieve him, and that it would be no good if he got hit and died of a gunshot wound. However, Foxface laughed and said that Blondie must be kidding. After all, he could easily avoid this, and that was the least that she expected from him. Foxface then asked him to die, her face finally morphing slightly from a smiling face to one of great irritation. It would be better for her if our dude just got discarded instead. But she paused when the neighborhood had gone silent. Blondie said nothing and Foxface fired no more bullets for a moment while our dude hid himself from her. She stepped forward, searching for him, and her fancy squeaky clean boots were neater than his worn-out sneakers. That's when our dude leapt out from his hiding place and grabbed her weapon. They both struggled to grab the gun, with the Foxface maintaining her tight grip with two hands, and our dude struggling to take it from her. The fake sister raised her knee to kick him in the gut, but our dude easily stopped that attempt with his other hand. Then, she let go of the gun with one hand and snatched the knife from her thigh, intending to take him out. Blondie used his elbow to block that attack as well, and her knife could not pierce him. She lashed out in her struggle against our dude, and Blondie countered every attack. He asked if that was all she got, and if Dead Mansion Talent had really died. Blondie easily knocked the girl to the ground and stared down at her with boredom, saying that she had not expected something like this. However, the Foxface responded by sighing in relief and beamed that it could not be true. Just in that moment, our dude heard the voice of his mum yelling out and asking him what he was doing. Sure enough, Hyuno's mum had appeared, and she saw Shin sitting over the body of a girl, looking like he was about to beat her up. The mother was horrified and told our dude that it was not okay to do that, and that he was supposed to be her son's friend. The evil fox smiled with contentment at her success, and the mother asked our dude if he had really been the one to hurt her precious child. Our dude had been caught by his mother, nearly beating up an agent from the Dead Mansion who, of course, looked to her like just a little girl. She was horrified, saying that he was not supposed to engage in such bad activities since he was supposed to be her son's friend. The little devil Foxface smiled in satisfaction that her plan had worked, as the mother asked our heartbroken dude if he had really been the one to hurt her son. However, our dude immediately jumped to his feet, insisting that it was not what it looked like. That was when the little devil Foxface took the opportunity to put on an act, and she called out to the old woman. She ran pitifully to the woman with tears in her eyes, and the old woman recognized the girl as Mary. The elderly woman asked what was going on here, and the little girl lied that she had just come around because she had something to ask. Blondie insisted that his mother not listen to her. However, the old woman yelled at him. She glared at him with great disappointment, and he could only watch like a kicked puppy. The old woman commanded that he stand there quietly, and our dude had no choice but to comply with the command with his head bowed sadly. He could not disobey his parents' orders. The wicked girl grinned as she continued to lie, and told the old woman that after she took her little brother back home, she had noticed some bruising on Eugene's body, and that the little boy was no longer talking. She lied that Lil Crazy had said that our dude beat him up, and the old woman's eyes widened in horror. She recalled that the principal had told her not to trust too much in Blondie. The fox-faced girl went on lying about how she had come to confrontation, but he had just started hitting her out of nowhere. Our dude could not bear to hear it, and he yelled to his mother that the girl was lying. The little girl smiled with joy, since they had promised they could do nothing to the old woman. However, there was a way to deal with her without directly touching her. Our guy begged his mother to listen to him, and that the girl had made up everything. However, his mother slowly approached him, and then she gave him a very firm slap. For a moment, the prize student Sean was speechless. Dead Mansion's aim was for the old woman to disown him, and the old woman, with tears in her eyes, told him to not call her his mother anymore. Dead Mansion had achieved all they ever wanted, as the old woman also added the words that our dude dreaded to hear the most. The old woman told him to not ever come back to her home, and our dude's head hung in defeat. Everything was going accordingly, and the next step was for Rachel to then show up, disguised as the elderly lady who acted as Shin's real mother. The lady showed up in her heeled shoes, and then asked what was going on with her son, and she asked what problems the boy had caused this time. The sexy trainer smiled as she adjusted her glasses, grinning that her son was such a handful, as everything finally fell into place. She smiled wickedly and said that they would settle all this back home. Back at the Dead Mansion, the director smiled a very wicked and satisfied smile of gold and silver. He yelled in joy that Mary had done a very good job, and he fell to his knees in prayer. He thanked the Lord in total supplication, now that he had finally gotten his prize. This was all thanks to the fox-faced girl called Mary, and the girl in question happily kicked her feet. It was a plan worthy of the Dead Mansion's top strategist, and the little girl beamed, telling the director that he did not have to mention it. Foxface was so pleased with the praise, and she said that she had just done as she had been ordered to do. Thanks to her hard work, their prize Sean would finally come home. The legend of the Dead Mansion Sean, and the director happily told her to come back quickly, and she accepted the command. Meanwhile, Rachel laughed and asked our dude if he liked the food that much. Our dude glared at her and asked if she was messing with him, as the sexy trainer kept pouring sauce all over the food in front of her, while our dude only ate junk food. The sexy triumphant trainer laughed that they had so much in common. He glared at her because she was just forcing him to eat with orders, and our dude thought that her preferences were way too weird anyway. She was forcing him to eat mind and pineapple, and it was torture. However, the evil trainer was just pleased that their prize student was following orders as expected, and she told him to make sure to eat all of it. Ownership of the child had finally returned to the Dead Mansion, and our dude tearfully ate up all of the food in front of him. Blondie begged her to at least give him some milk when someone suddenly rolled into the room in a wheelchair, noting that they had finally caught our dude. It was the evil businessman, Attacker Joe's father, who smiled and asked our dude how he liked the new place he had gotten them. Rachel admitted that the place was not bad, and the businessman laughed because this was the most expensive penthouse in the area. Our dude was sure that he had heard that voice before, and he looked up to see the businessman all bandaged up and in a wheelchair. With a mad look in his eyes, the businessman said that he did not care how much money he had to spend if it meant that he could catch the kid who messed him up. Our dude jumped up in shock to see that familiar face, but he still struggled to remember. Blondie even thought the dude was doing a cosplay, much to the frustration of the businessman who glared at him in rage. The man's hand shook in anger, and the sexy trainer finally said that was enough. She had already explained to the businessman that Shin was under their care, and she pointed a weapon at the businessman, if just to remind him. In exchange for the businessman's cooperation, they would do nothing to his son. That was the basis for their cooperation. The businessman remembered the terms, and he said that he did not need to be reminded, since it was business. It was not like his target for revenge was only our dude, and he cleaned the blood from his nose with a wicked look in his eyes. The sexy trainer laughed that the businessman could deal with other things however he wanted. All the businessman had to remember that it had nothing to do with the Dead Mansion. So, if the businessman wanted, he could kill that old woman, and the Dead Mansion would have nothing to do with it. Our dude was horrified to hear these evil terms that the evil trainer had agreed to, and he asked her to repeat herself. Blondie asked if the sexy trainer was talking about Huno's mother, who worked silently alone and sat at the snack shop. A customer appeared behind her and asked for a serving of tteokbokki and a serving of fritters. The woman agreed to prepare it right away, and our dude thought of the mother he'd had, though for a short period of time. He recalled the first time that she had served so much food for him. The customer noticed what the old woman was making and it looked delicious, so he asked for some of those as well. The old woman agreed with a smile and told the customer to wait a moment. But deep down inside, she missed her adopted son. She recalled the picture that the principal had shown her and reminded herself that he was a bad kid and he was the one who had beat up her son. In her distraction, she accidentally cut herself and she cried out in pain, dropping the knife. The customer also cried out in surprise and rushed in because the lady was bleeding and she was bleeding a lot. The old woman tried to reassure the customer that she was fine and that she would stop bleeding soon, but she was already crying. The customer then menacingly asked if that was so as he reached for a weapon inside his clothes. He said that it was good that the wound was minor as his fist tightened around a knife handle. The businessman told the sexy trainer not to worry about the aftermath, since a business partner of his would take care of it, and that business partner lunged at the crying old woman with a knife. Suddenly, the old woman received a call and her eyes widened in surprise at the news that she had heard. She suddenly told the customer to eat as much as he wanted, and she did not care about the money as she dashed out of the snack shop. The customer asked where she was going all of a sudden, but the old lady could not stop because her son, her precious Hyunho, had finally woken up in his hospital. The doctors were shocked that the boy was conscious and he groaned into the breathing apparatus. The doctor told the boy that it would be hard to talk right away and told him not to push himself. For now, the boy could just tell the doctor where he was and if he recognized the place. The doctor asked the poor victim if he could recollect what happened before he got into a coma. The memory that Hyunho could recollect was yelling at his mother and his mother apologizing to him, even though he had been the one at fault. He wanted to apologize and he cried for his mother, asking where she was. He cried desperately that he wanted to see his mother. Just then, the hospital door was thrown open and the old woman rushed inside to see her son. She could not believe that he was really awake, but the nurses told her to be careful of the blood on her hands. Her son apologized to her with tears in his eyes as he called out to her. He admitted that he was wrong as she grabbed his hand, and the old woman wept bitter tears of joy. Outside the door, the pretend customer peeked inside the hospital room. He told the businessman about how the mother and son were together and how he should look for an opportunity to take care of them both at once. However, the businessman instead told the attacker to just be on standby and for now, they would halt the mission. The businessman smiled wickedly now that the plan had changed. Meanwhile, the sexy trainer threw a chair in rage and she screamed in anger. Her hair was a mess and she asked how dare the evil businessman go behind her back and kidnap her prized student, Sean. Our dude had indeed been kidnapped, and the businessman laughed wickedly, saying that he would take care of them himself in front of our dude. At the White Tiger Job Center, the sexy trainer Rachel had come to visit and she sat there with a scowl on her face. She was seated beside little Eugene who also looked very tense. A smiling lady popped out with a tray of tea and asked if they had been kept waiting, while also offering them some coffee. The sexy trainer called the secretary really slow and asked what was worth making her wait that long. The smiling lady laughed and apologized for the wait, and she explained with a smile that the market and the Byingwoo Construction's headquarters were one thing, and there were a lot of things to tally since the pretend nun had made such a big mess. The hot chocolate that the smiling lady had prepared was for little Eugene and said she advised the little boy to drink slowly, and the little boy happily thanked her. The nun said that they paid all that money to the White Tiger Job Center so that they could be useful, so she expected to see the results, and she expected the job center to act more professionally. The smiling lady took her seat as she considered the nun's words, and then she agreed that the sexy trainer was right. However, she smiled and said that it was very unprofessional for the trainer to make such a huge mess without considering the aftermath. The trainer was immediately offended, of course, and Eugene watched the exchange with much apprehension as the White Tiger lady laughed at the trainer needing an explanation for what she had said. The little boy knew it had been a bad idea to follow the trainer here, and he felt that he should have stayed at home. Anyway, the smiling lady admitted that she had taken care of it according to the reports, so they should take a look. The sexy trainer was still annoyed and asked why she was being served in a paper cup. Then, the smiling lady just remembered that Byingwoo Construction said that they did not need any compensation, and she asked how the sexy trainer had managed that. The trainer just shrugged and said that they had both had something that they both needed, and that was how a professional does things. Then, whatever mess Byingwoo Constructions made had nothing to do with Dead Mansion, and even the sexy trainer had to admit that was how things were so that they could take care of their shared enemy without breaking the promise that Dead Mansion made. Still, the smiling lady advised that it was for the best if they were a bit more careful, and the sexy trainer asked what they meant. The lady went on to explain that as a professional, the trainer should be dealing with other professionals, and not with some delinquents. Then, the smiling lady smiled even wider and asked if Byingwoo Constructions could really be trusted, and she wondered if they were worthy of being a business partner. The nun felt frozen in place as she recalled that time in the White Tiger office, and she cursed in an angry scream. She grabbed the chair and swung it hard in rage, cursing the partners that had betrayed her. She could not believe that they had dared to steal the Dead Mansion's precious prize, and she gripped her gun with rage. A large truck sped down the road, and inside the truck was the businessman who cocked his head with mocking joyful laughter, saying that he could not believe it. He found that our dude truly was useless without his orders, and he pulled at Blondie's hair, noting that he was under Dead Mansion and he could not do anything without them ordering him to. It was really surprising to the man, and he wondered if it was some kind of brainwashing. Our dude glared at him in hate, unable to fight back or even curse with the gag in his mouth. The businessman went on laughing and wheeled away on his chair, as he had suddenly thought of doing something interesting. The businessman had imagined something new, and he considered buying Blondie and then ordering him to kill the old woman at the snack shop. That thought filled our dude with so much fear and horror, and the businessman laughed loudly at the thought, saying that would have been really interesting to see. The wicked businessman laughed that our dude could not make such expressions already, as he had not even gotten started. Soon enough, the wicked man would be able to tear the old woman and her son into pieces, just like the old woman had asked our dude to do to him, and the businessman planned to do it all right in front of Blondie's eyes. His nose bled as he thought of how our dude would be powerless to do anything but watch it happen, and that was because Blondie could do nothing without his orders. So, the wicked villain wanted our dude to just sit tight and enjoy the show, since he would be the next target. The villainous businessman laughed at our dude's angry face and reminded him that he had told our dude before that he would kill all of them. Meanwhile, at the hospital, the old woman peeled apples for her injured son. The son watched his mother work, but paused and pointed out that she had cut herself. The old woman laughed as she waved her hand, saying that she only just got nicked a little, and that it was nothing serious. Her son sat up, saying that she always said that, and he considered going to ask for some bandages, but she insisted that she was fine and asked him to just sit still. Her son insisted that it was fine and that the doctor had encouraged him to try to move around a little. However, the old woman had decided to go find a bandage by herself, so she told her son to stay and wait for her. She smiled and laughed that her son was stubborn, just like his father. However, as she headed out into the hall, she could not help but wonder why it was so dark out there. She called out and asked if anyone was there, but the dark hospital was unresponsive. The woman looked around and wondered where everyone went, unaware of the dark shadow behind her. The dark shadow knocked out the old woman, and she fell to the floor with a dull thud. It was the big guy with the glasses who worked for the villainous businessman, and he smiled that he had taken one down. He gave instructions for the men to put her away in the car first. Meanwhile, the evil businessman was still laughing at our dude and saying that his predicament was interesting. He could not believe that our dude really could do nothing without his commands. Meanwhile, the door to Hyunho's hospital room opened, and he turned to ask his mother what had taken her so long. However, it was the evil businessman who appeared instead, and he apologized for taking this time. He cleaned his nose and cocked his head, commenting that he finally got to see what Hyunho looked like, and the poor boy had no idea who the man in the wheelchair was. The man laughed at the question and he introduced himself as the father of attacker Joe. The boy was alarmed to see so many muscular men enter his hospital room suddenly, and the businessman noted that his son had done many bad things to Hyunho, and that it was all really regrettable. He poked the poor boy's broken leg and said that it must have hurt a lot. This was why the businessman always emphasized that efficiency was key, and that by leaving Hyunho half alive, they had to do the work all over again. The traumatized victim stared in horror at attacker Joe's dad, his face going pale. Finally, sexy trainer Rachel had to admit that the smiling girl from the White Tiger Job Center had been right. She stood at the top of the roof, dressed in tight leather assassin clothes, and said that she should not have worked with those jerks who ended up betraying her. She shot a weapon at the hospital building and a claw hooked into the wall. One of the guards noticed it, but it was already too late to stop the mad woman that swung into the building. She crashed through the window and immediately attacked all the men around her, calling them third-rate delinquent punks. She wanted her prize student back and asked how dare they betray the dead mansion. Meanwhile, the businessman's eyes widened in mad sick glee as he had expected that Rachel would come. She lunged and pranced around the room like a wild animal, easily beating up the men who tried to attack her. They were not a match for her, and she weaved easily between their attacks, cutting them down one by one. She slashed them down with a smile of satisfaction on her face, happy to bring down her enemies. One dude grabbed her from behind in an attempt to restrain her, and he shouted, laughing in glee, that he had her. However, she just grinned and asked if he likes hugging her that much. Then, with a mad grin on her face, she knocked her head back and smashed into the man's face. She easily tossed the man away and he screamed in pain and held his head. Once again she lunged, and beat up all the men, throwing them around the room as they groaned in pain. Some of them she even kicked out of the window with reckless abandon and glee. Meanwhile, the bodyguards scooped up Hyunho, even as the poor boy protested and asked what they were doing. The businessman had no intention of dealing with the mad lunatic who was the sexy trainer of Dead Mansion, so he ordered his men to grab the kid and they could continue as planned in another place. He wheeled his chair out the room and the goons followed after him with their captive on one of them's shoulders. Rachel kept fighting, but she also noticed her targets were getting away, and she growled, asking where they thought that they were running off to. She was going to ask them again, and this time she expected a response as she asked them where they had taken her prize student. The large goon with the glasses snapped his fingers, and they had expected the crazy pretend nun to come. Many goons came out of the neighboring doors, and they flooded into the hall in waves, all of them blocking her path. The nun glanced at them, unamused and irritated. They surrounded her on all sides, each of them armed and dangerous. She smirked and asked why there were so many of them, and giggled when she asked if they were roaches or something similar. One of them turned on a chainsaw threateningly, and the sexy trainer laughed that they had even brought some interesting tools. She swung open her jacket, saying that she should take out her tools as well, and she revealed the many guns that she had strapped on her body. She raised them with mad glee and immediately started firing at the men, while also encouraging them to come at her, for they were nothing but roaches to her. Some of the men groaned as they fell and screamed as they gripped their wounded body parts. Confidently, the sexy trainer raised her gun and posed. But the big man in glasses did not take her seriously, and he laughed since she wanted to play with guns. Our dude was in the room and his eyes widened in horror when the glasses dude brought out guns. He fired at her, and she actually got hit in the leg. Slowly, she turned to him with malice in her eyes, and she saw the gun pointed out of the bandage he wore on his arm. The big man in glasses chuckled and threatened that he would be aiming for her head next. But suddenly, our dude asked if this meant that the dude in glasses was threatening to kill the sexy trainer as he took out his gag. The dude in glasses was confused when an attack came flying towards him, and our dude got him in a face-turning punch after he had knocked down the two people holding him. The head goon in glasses was confused and could not understand how our dude had gotten free without orders. However, our dude asked the man if he had forgotten that Blondie had now been reclaimed by Dead Mansion, and these men had just threatened to kill a trainer of the Dead Mansion. According to the third principle, he now classified all the men who threatened her as a threat to Dead Mansion. Even the trainer was shocked by his reaction and she stared at him in awe. Blondie swore to break through the current situation, and with a darkness in his eyes, he glared at all the enemies in front of him. He was the Dead Mansion's special training multipurpose weapon, Project Good Child, and his codename was Sean. He was also named Parkshan, and his current affiliation is the Dead Mansion. According to the third principle, our dude classified all the men present as a threat to Dead Mansion, so he had to break through the current situation no matter what. One of the larger men lunged at our dude, calling him a punk for slipping away like a little rat. However, our guy easily caught his hand and blocked the large dude's attack. He then swiftly punched the guard, chiding him for not making the smart move of grabbing his opponent more firmly. The dude's teeth got knocked out and he cried pitifully. However, our dude was not having that and he knocked the dude over again for acting like a baby over losing a tooth, especially since he was still not done beating them up. He slammed his fist on the dude's head, sending maximum pain traveling through the guard's body. Blondie slammed the dude to the ground, and the sexy trainer watched it all happen in awe. Her prize student currently did not have a parent who could give him orders. The reason her prize student was fighting now was because he wanted to protect her. The sexy trainer was so moved and touched to see her favorite student get himself free in order to fight for her, and she stared in awe that he cared for her. However, that was not the case at all. Our dude was indeed bobbing and weaving among the guards that surrounded him, all of them gunning to take him down. One of them lunged at him with a big metal bar, but he easily dodged that guy and his very long sweep over his head. There were so many of them coming at him that Blondie had to search for something that he could use as a weapon. He rolled in his search and the guards raced for him, yelling that he was getting away and they could not let that happen. The guards laughed as they lunged after him, calling him slippery and asking him where he was running to. The laughing guard even offered to go easy on the kid if he just gave up, and he did not notice the syringe coming right for his eyes. It immediately got stuck in his eyes and the guard screamed in agony, shouting out the pain from his eyes. Our dude grinned manically and told the guard not to be such a baby since the guard was a dear patient, and our dude made sure that it would feel less painful as he brandished syringes like knives. Now then, he raced back to face the guards and laughed maniacally that it was vaccination time, tossing syringes everywhere. The men screamed and cried out, saying that our dude should wait until they caught him, planning to give him the beating of a lifetime. However, our dude shoved the screaming guard into the ground and for a moment there was silence as the other guards sized up their opponent. Suddenly, one of the guards shouted for all the others to get out of the way. The dude had appeared with a chainsaw and he threatened to split our dude in two, laughing maniacally as his chainsaw buzzed. The dude with the saw chased after our dude as he ran down the hall. Our dude yelled at the crazy saw dude to hold on and slow down, and that an electric saw was a bit too much. Blondie raced away and turned a bend. The dude with the saw yelled for our dude to stop running. But that was not going to happen. When the saw dude went around the bend, it was in time for our dude to shove a gurney at him, and the saw dude fell off his feet. Our dude narrowly dodged the saw, holding his breath in horror from how close it had come. The dude with the saw groaned of course, and our dude tied up the saw dude's arms, gurney, saw, and all. Blondie smirked that since the guard wanted so badly to use the electric saw, he turned the dude to face the other guys as the dude screamed and asked what our dude was doing. However, our dude now had a wicked and gleeful look on his face as he turned the saw guy on his colleagues. There was a lot of screaming from the hospital as our dude enacted various horror on the men present using the saw. Suddenly, our dude screamed in despair, telling someone to get a hold of themselves. It was the saw dude and Blondie asked if the dude was a broken Pachita. However, the poor man could no longer take the horrors and he whined that there was too much blood. Blondie still told the old man to get a hold of himself and that he still had a lot of questions. He pulled out another deadly syringe and asked the tied-down dude where they had taken Hyunho's mother. The saw dude panicked, and then the teacher stumbled over, recognizing that our dude was done with his side. He smiled and said that he just started to play with them seriously, but they had all run away. They had also taken Hyunho's mum with them and he intended to chase after them. However, the trainer had no intention of doing that. She said that our dude must be mistaken about something, and that they had not been fighting to rescue her. The jerks fallen to the floor had kidnapped him, and our dude was marked as property of the dead mansion, so she had fought to take back what was rightfully theirs. The sexy trainer fixed her gun, saying that he had also fought as a member of the dead mansion, and he had used his powers to protect her. So now that he was free and the enemies had run away, it was time to wrap things and go back to the dead mansion. However, our dude picked up something from the floor and pointed out to the sexy trainer that she was the one mistaking something. He got to his knees and said that he was doing this all for her, and the trainer stared at him in confusion. Just as Blondie said, he had used his powers for her and to protect her. He had not used them for anyone else, and she was surprised that he had indeed used his powers for her. He very carefully bandaged the wound on her leg, and our dude went on to explain that the jerks dared to touch their dear instructor. Blondie could not sit back and watch as they did that, so they could not just leave such a threat to do as they pleased. Our dude wanted to go find them and kill them all, and to show them what happened when they dared touch their dead mansion's instructor. The trainer's head was in the clouds as she was so in love with the idea of her prized student murdering people for her sake. Our dude mumbled like he was shy, saying that was how it was, so it was time to find the rest of the dudes and kill them. The trainer thought that our dude was always the best. However, our dude was just setting up a bait that he hoped she would take. Knowing her, that should have been enough for her. So, the trainer raised her guns and she followed our dude to find the jerks and go to tear them to pieces. Meanwhile, the old woman groggily opened her eyes and slowly came awake. She was shocked to see the villainous father of attacker Joe hovering over her, and she cried out, jumping back, telling him that he had scared her. The villainous businessman apologized for startling her, and the old woman asked him where they were. She had been at the hospital, but suddenly things had happened. However, the businessman said that he did not have the leisure to explain things slowly, so he had to bring the woman here like this. The woman was confused, but she suddenly recognized the place where she was, and he agreed that she was right. The place she had woken in was the classroom that both their children had shared, and the old woman had woken at Huno's desk. She stared in surprise at her son's desk, and saw all the horrible things that had been scribbled on it. Kids these days were so cruel that even she was shocked by the lengths they would go to bully her son. She then asked the villainous businessman why he was showing her something like this and who he was. He laughed that she did not recognize him, and that he could not help it since he ended up in such a state. The businessman took off his bandages and the old woman gasped in horror as he told her that it was nice to see her again. The businessman's face was gruesome, and he said it all happened because of that kid, Park-shin. He hated that kid so much, and he told the old woman that his child was also a victim. The old woman was confused about what he said, and the businessman went on to say that Blondie was the one who made him and his son to be banged up and crippled. The old woman could not believe that Shin had done this, and the villainous businessman went on pretending to cry that Blondie was the real perpetrator behind Huno's bullying. He lied that the blonde kid had framed his child, and that the rumors had already been going around the school. It was a famous story between the kids. The old woman recalled all those pictures that she had seen, and the villainous old man bowed his head, saying that they had not paid enough attention to their kids. He fell off his chair, saying that he could not believe that they had just learnt this truth. The old woman asked if he was okay, but the businessman just said that he was going to get revenge. The villainous man swore that this would be his repentance for not being able to protect his son. He also said that it would be their repentance to their sons as parents. However, the old woman worried that revenge was a bit too much against children when they could just talk to the school and get the law involved. The businessman muttered that the kind old woman was too naive, and asked if she really thought that would achieve anything. The school would not do anything, and even when her son fell from a window, the school had done nothing. The businessman said that one could not just let Blondie escape scot-free, because if they did, the boy would never stop. Blondie indeed had no plans of stopping, and he got all dressed up with his gang of opponents to team up and fight the bigger threat that had appeared. The villainous father asked the old woman if she understood, and he stabbed a knife into the floor, saying that had to take charge. Then, he took the old woman's hand and told her that it was their turn to get revenge as he shoved a hand in her hand. Back at the dead mansion, the director had read all of the reports that had been submitted to him, and he had heard of Byungwoo Constructions. He felt it was an insult for a group with no background to target their prized possession without knowing their place. Back at the school, the director's orders were sent to Rachel as she moved in with her army of children. The construction group had dared to mess with them, and Mary and Eugene were ready to rumble. They were to make sure that the group learnt the price for messing with their dead mansion. This was our dude's first order since his return, and he was instructed to show them his skills. The director gave them the order to get rid of that cult and to hand them the wrath of judgment. Blondie called out to his sexy trainer, and our dude mumbled that he left his earpiece at the desk earlier, so he could no longer hear the director's instructions. They all stared at him in disappointment, and our dude asked if someone had been saying something. Blondie had ruined a really cool moment, and he asked Mary to lend him one of hers. However, she haughtily said that she was not using just an earpiece. Rachel called him careless for acting like a dumb child. Mary agreed that it was disappointing to see someone called a legend acting that way, and even Eugene thought that he acted like an amateur. Blondie had to apologize in disgrace. Putting that aside, our dude was surprised that they had come to his school, and he asked if they were sure that their opposition was there. However, the sexy train had checked the traffic cameras around the area, so our dude was relieved, knowing that Hyunho and his mother were also there. The trainer watched him skeptically, and our dude glared into the window in front of him, staring at his reflection. His trainer reminded him that their goal was to eliminate the enemy, and that he was not to do anything useless. Our dude tightened his fist and said that he was well aware of that, and that he just had to go and destroy everything as he marched in with his crew. The cameras watched their approach, and someone watched, saying that he had been a bit skeptical when they told him, but the target really was the dead mansion. He even recognized instructor Rachel. The big muscular dude said that this job was going to be hard without extra payment, and he asked if his employer knew that. His colleague watched the cameras, surprised to see that they even came with little kids, and they asked if the kids were killers as well. The guard told his colleague that the children were not killers. To Dead Mansion, those children were mercenaries, and the person with silver hair observed with an amused smile. The guard explained that it was just that the mercenaries were a bit young. The businessman said that he would pay the two however much they needed, as long as they got rid of all the fighters from the Dead Mansion as promised. The villainous businessman said that there were supposed to be 3 of them, and the big guy said that their big brother was running a little late, but it would be fine even without him, so the businessman had nothing to worry about. The businessman warned them that their opponents were not some average Joes, so he asked again if they were sure that they would be okay with just 2. However, the big guy glared down at the rich man and reminded him that they had just said that they would be fine. The silver-haired dude laughed and told Dimitri, the big guy, that he was scaring their employer. However, the big D guy just laughed and told his brother not to worry since he would never lay his hands on a client. After all, he was a professional. Besides, the big D guy and his brother were different from those kids that they were going to fight. Meanwhile, Rachel led her kids up the stairs as they searched for the crippled businessman. Our dude paused and said that it was a bit too quiet, and he thought it was weird that they had not seen a single one of the guards yet. Mary was sure that they had tracked them to the school, but she admitted that it was strange that none of the CCTV inside the school was working. Eugene suggested splitting up and searching since the school was huge and their enemies were amateurs at best. The sexy trainer said that the little boy had a point and that it would be easier to take them out that way. So, little Mary said that she would look for the security room to get the CCTV back online. Rachel also reminded them to contact her if they happened to run into any problems, and to make sure that their earpieces were on. However, our dude did not have an earpiece and the trainer sighed in irritation while the other children whispered about him being a clumsy amateur. The trainer sighed and asked our dude to just follow her, and she asked the other kids to report everything they found after searching their area. Eugene decided to take a look at the new building, so the little girl and the little boy left together, leaving our dude and his trainer alone. Our dude noticed the trainer had something to say, and she turned slowly, gushing creepily over how she got to be on a mission alone with her favorite little boy whom she totally raised. Blondie immediately got geared up in his search for the thugs and yelled at them to show up from wherever they were hiding. However, the sexy trainer asked our dude if he still had not given up on that old lady and her son, and he froze for a moment. He turned nervously to her, and the trainer asked why our dude would go so far to the point of obsessing over them. He tried to deny it, saying that he had no such obsession with them, but she just told him to give up. The trainer said that if he kept clinging to them like that, the two normal people would only be in danger. Hesitant, Blondie asked what she meant by that, and the trainer pointed out that they were just regular people. However, in just a couple of days, they had become the Dead Mansion's target, and they even got kidnapped by third-rate hoodlums. The trainer moved in closer and asked our dude why he thought all of that happened to that innocent family. It was easy if he thought really hard about it. The family would have led a normal life if he had not appeared, but due to his involvement, their life had completely changed. Even Dead Mansion had gotten involved because they had followed him here, and the lives of those innocent and normal people kept on crumbling. It was all because of our dude, and the trainer grinned wickedly as she informed him of this. Everything was his fault, and our dude was frozen as he realized that her words were true. Everything had happened because of him, and Hyunho and his mother kept suffering. The trainer said that was right, and that he should just give up. The only place our dude belonged was at Dead Mansion with its hallways lined with dead-eyed kids. Suddenly, our dude saw something and he pushed the trainer back, telling her to look out as a well-aimed bullet shot past them. The shooter was a little disappointed that our dude had noticed, but they acknowledged that the kid's senses were not bad. Rachel was shocked to see the shooter and asked what he was doing there. Our dude was surprised and asked who the guy was. The man was the second in command of a Russian mercenary unit, barefoot Dmitry Medvedev, and he had little Mary slung over his shoulder. The big D greeted the sexy trainer, saying that it had been a while. It had been 2 years since he had seen her at Vladivostok. Rachel called out to Mary, but the big D just tossed her aside in amusement, noting that the kid's name was Mary. He smacked her around a little since she was buzzing around, and he told the sexy trainer not to stare at him like that. His target this time was the Dead Mansion, and no matter how much he liked her, a mission was a mission. The trainer raised her gun and asked if Byingwoo Constructions had hired the dude. The big D laughed, saying that they were pros and that she was not supposed to be showing her emotions. Still, since they went way back, he grinned that he would let things slide just this once if she agreed to go out with him. She cursed at him with rage, and our dude was confused at the exchange. The trainer fired multiple bullets at the Russian man, but Big D easily dodged her attacks. The Russian man grinned as he evaded their bullets, and he fired back some love shots of his own. The trainer switched out her used bullets and reloaded instantly, cursing that the man had hired Barefoot, and that things had now gotten complicated. She called out to our dude and told him to look as she battled bullets with bullets. This was the world that Blondie had dragged that old lady into. However, to her shock, our dude was long gone and she stared at the emptiness beside her. Meanwhile, Big D also reloaded his gun, and he grinned, saying that the trainer was such a decisive girl and that he would feel bad for killing her, even if it was just for a mission. He wondered if she would fall unconscious if he just put a few holes in her. However, our dude had already reappeared right beside Big D's hiding spot, and he told the big guy that he did not think the man would be able to take their trainer down with his skill level. Big D grinned and asked our dude if that was so. He lunged at the kid, pointing his gun at him, but our dude was prepared, and he raised the man's gun hand as he fired at them. Our dude leapt inside the classroom and reminded the Big D that he had already said that the Russian man's skills were not enough. Our dude's fists came flying at Big D's face, and he knocked the dude right into the floor. However, the Russian man was still conscious and he smirked in amusement, noting that Blondie was different from Mary. The Russian licked his lips because he had gotten excited. The Russian mercenaries called Barefoot had a very cruel entrance test where the men would stand outside, shirtless in the snow. The mercenaries had to go into the Siberian wilderness barefooted and come out alive after having hunted something. They got their name through such traditions, which was why they were called Barefoot, and the Big D had brought down a giant Siberian bear. The Russian mercenary licked his lips and laughed at our dude's punch, and Blondie was shocked to see that the mercenary was not fazed at all. He had landed the punch without any issues, so he had no idea why it did not work. Blondie did not have any more time to ponder because he got instantly knocked back so hard that he went flying into a nearby wall. The Big D grinned and called our dude a twerp, saying that a bear hitting him with its tail would hurt more than this. Then, the Russian mercenary glanced down at his gun and realized that Blondie had managed to pull off a little trick in a short amount of time. The mercenary grinned and asked our dude if he was from Dead Mansion, and that he found that interesting. The mercenary asked him to bring it on, and our dude nursed his wound with a curse. Just the difference in their physique was huge, and the punch had nearly knocked him senseless. The Big D smirked and said that our dude was just a little twerp in the end. However, suddenly the mercenary froze and he dodged when the sexy trainer fired at him with maximum efficiency. Big D had briefly forgotten that he was fighting two and not one. The sexy trainer told the Big D that he had done enough, but the mercenary just laughed that he had gotten startled, and that he had nearly got hit that time. The trainer threatened that if he poked his head out, she would be sure to put 3 holes in him, and the Russian man laughed, saying that hearing her say such things got his heart fluttering for some reason. However, the mercenary was not her only opponent, and the trainer's eyes widened when a bullet went soaring past her. It was some of the armed thugs, and they were all dressed in bulletproof vests. The trainer cursed now that the annoying bunch of goons had shown up again, which made fighting the already difficult mercenary even harder. As she ran to hide, the trainer heard a little voice call out to her and saw Mary hiding nearby. The trainer asked the little manipulator if she was alright. However, the little girl struggled to speak. So, the trainer slid in even closer and asked the girl what she was trying to say, telling her to speak more clearly. The little girl confessed that they had to fight more than just one person. Although it was for a short while, the little fox face had been able to see through the security cameras, and she had identified one more enemy. That said enemy had shown up at the place where Eugene searched, and the silver-haired man waved, noting that the little boy was part of Dead Mansion. The silver-haired man asked the boy to play with him, and the little boy tensed as he could tell that this man was dangerous, and the silver-haired man began to unzip a bag. Meanwhile, the mercenary grumbled that his opponent was so popular that he now had competitors dying to fight him. The trainer cursed, but our dude stumbled to his feet and told the trainer to go and help Eugene. It would be dangerous for the little boy if there were more goons around. Blondie said that he would take care of the giant, and the Big D was amused. Our dude staggered to his feet and said that he had to return all the hits that he had taken. However, the trainer was worried for him, warning our dude that the mercenary was not the type of guy that he could look down on. However, the goons outside would not give them time, and they had started charging in with their guns and weapons. The trainer cursed as she focused on shooting down all the goons while protecting Mary. The men were shocked and cried out in pain when the trainer was able to shoot them, since the bulletproofing did not extend to their arms or legs. Blondie once again asked the trainer to take little fox face and to go ahead, which he would follow shortly. Our dude reminded his loving trainer that he was the legend of the Dead Mansion. The trainer agreed and decided to go ahead. She shot through the barrage of men blocking their path, and told her student to quickly follow after he had destroyed the Russian mercenary. The Russian mercenary yelled and asked her where she was going, annoyed that his crush would leave him alone with a little boy. The mercenary tried to call the sexy trainer to wait a little longer, but our dude used the opportunity to give the big guy a firm punch. Big D folded his heavy fists and shot a punch back, his arm shooting like a cannon in a shot that our dude just managed to dodge. The mercenary glared at our dude, saying that he was in the middle of a conversation with Rachel and that the child needed to learn some manners. Our dude groaned, noting that the mercenary's punches were heavy and he was doing his best just to parry those hits. His opponent was by no means weak, and before our dude could even process it, another punch had been fired at him. Once again, Blondie was thrown across the room and he fell to the ground. He could not believe that he had gotten hit when he had been so sure that he had blocked the punch, yet there was blood seeping out of a wound. He realized it was the gun that he had taken apart earlier, and the mercenary had added the weapon to the punch, and he had drawn blood. The Russian licked his lips, asking if our dude had gotten surprised because the punch stung. Blondie got to his feet and laughed, saying that his opponent was so big but he still used all sorts of petty tricks. Big D chuckled and said that he called it a strategy, and our dude asked about that. In our dude's opinion, it was because the mercenary used such petty tricks that the sexy trainer would not play with him. The mercenary laughed that the little kid even knew how to taunt, and said that he hoped our dude would not regret the taunts later. Our dude laughed and asked what irritated the man that much, the part where he said that the mercenary used petty tricks, or the one about the sexy trainer. The mercenary grinned a big evil smile, and raced at our dude, swearing to grind him to pieces. Our dude was also ready to figure out how to defeat this guy, and he tried again to block the punch. The mercenary laughed, asking our dude if he thought that the Russian was playing around. Once again, our dude got flung across the room, but the Russian noticed 2 pens embedded in his arm. The mercenary laughed at the petty attack attempt and yanked out the pens, saying that it was just like a kid to play around with things like that. Our dude noted that the mercenary had gotten faster, and as he flung his jacket at the mercenary, the Russian asked when our dude was going to take this fight seriously. Big D easily tossed aside the jacket, cursing that our dude was going to be annoying till the end. However, he paused when he suddenly found no sight of our dude. However, he did notice a door slightly ajar, and the mercenary licked his fight-hungry lips, happy that our dude was still struggling. Inside the silent room, all was still, and our dude had hidden behind a desk with his head bowed. It was just like his trainer had warned, and our dude cursed because his opponent was really not someone that he could look down on. Our dude could not understand why someone like that came to such a place, but then he recalled the trainer's ominous words about bad things happening all because of him. All of the danger flowed in just like him, and the danger entered the lives of the people that he cared about the most. That was how those people's normal lives started to fall apart. The trainer had told our dude that he was the source of it all, and he sat there in the room with his head hung in defeat. Our dude gently rubbed his aching arm and raised his gaze with a determination in his haunted eyes. The door was thrown open as the big man appeared, laughing that break time was over for the little kid and that he wanted to enjoy the second round. However, our dude interrupted the man's words by saying that the trainer might be right. If Blondie had not been there would be no need for a mercenary like the Big D to come all the way there. There would be no reason for Hyunho's family to be in danger either. Our dude was the reason that things had turned out like this, so he tore his clothes and tightened them around his wound, saying that he needed to end it all with his own hands too. He could not just sit on the floor and cry because he was in pain. The mercenary paused as he noticed that the kid had changed a little, and he realized that it was time to stop playing around. Big D figured it was best to end it quickly, and he lunged at our dude, who dodged the attack. Our dude then punched at the guy, attacking so quickly that the Russian mercenary could not even track his movements with his eyes. Our dude slammed his foot on the man's leg and then delivered a swift rage-filled knee kick to the mercenary's face. With blank dead eyes, our dude asked Big D if he was surprised because the attack stung, and called the mercenary a twerp. The mercenary laughed, saying that he thought our dude was just a little kid, but he paused to acknowledge our dude's name as Sean. The mercenary grinned, licking his wound as usual and saying that the hit was not so bad this time, and that it had finally made a noticeable impact on him. He smiled as he called out to our dude, who had taken a battle stance and was ready to brawl. 2 years ago, in Vladivostok, the Big D Russian mercenary cursed in annoyance as he waited outside in the cold. He had finally gotten assigned a mission, but it was to pick someone up. On top of that, he had ended up picking up a bunch of brats, and he was very disappointed in the chosen mission. However, the nun in charge of them protested that the children were not brats. She said that they were the good kids of their dead mansion and that they were perfect products. Behind her, a few children were lined up and they stared with blank eyes. The sexy trainer recognized Dmitri from the Barefoot Mercenaries and noted that he was younger than she had expected. Our dude thought that she was messing with him for calling him young, but the pretend nun just asked the children to get into the car since something would soon explode. The mercenary started to ask what would explode when the building behind suddenly got enveloped in flames with a large bang. He turned in shock, asking what that was, but the sexy trainer just told him that they were leaving now, and she asked him to drive. The mercenary was impressed by the fireworks, and he asked if it was truly the doing of the nun and a bunch of kids. She said that she was just an instructor, so the explosion was the result of the children's hard work. She happily asked if their trip had been educational, and they all responded that it was. The trainer added that she had noticed that David missed a lot of shots earlier, and she asked if there was an issue with the gun. A professional had to always maintain the gun, and she told him to keep that in mind. The boy called David acknowledged her correction, and the instructor added that Amy had to be composed when she was acting since the trainer had noticed the girl mumbling her words earlier. She also added that she had heard Tom's footsteps when he had been sneaking in, and she wanted him to be lighter on his feet. And Eddie needed to throw away the candy that he had taken from the meeting room earlier since it was important not to leave any traces that could lead back to him. Eddie sadly pulled out the candy and Big D laughed in amusement to hear that the brats had done something like this. The sexy trainer said again that her children were not brats, and that they were the good kids of Dead Mansion. The mercenary then noticed the sexy trainer reaching out her hand to him, and she nervously asked why she was coming closer. She yanked out his cigarette, telling him that it was important for him to put it out, since smoking was bad for the kids. She knew that Big D was the little brother of Barefoot's leader who was called Bare Knuckle, but she did not think that the Big D seemed very knowledgeable. He angrily turned to complain that she was messing with him when she suddenly took off her nun cap, and her long hair came flowing down, and her tight outfit worked to emphasize her sexy melons. Big D fell in love at first sight and he could only stare at her. The sexy trainer asked if there was something on her face, but he quickly turned away, saying that it was nothing. However, he did notice a long scar on her forehead and he asked what had happened. He nervously asked if the children had given her that scar. However, the trainer said that it was not the children's fault. She explained that she had gotten this scar when she was training a boy called Sean, and that the boy was the legend of the Dead Mansion. The mercenary was curious to hear about a legend, and the nun smiled wistfully, saying that the child was a masterpiece, someone that the Dead Mansion gave a title to, and they called him a genius in their field, a masterpiece. Unfortunately, they had lost him and she wondered if the boy was still alive. The trainer told the mercenary that if he ever ran into our dude, he should let her know. Big D had no idea what the nun was talking about, so the trainer explained that the dude should look out for a child with the word 1 tattooed on his back. The Russian mercenary laughed, seeing that his crush had finally found the child that she had been looking for. Since he was Sean, Big D agreed that he would acknowledge that our dude was not just some kid. Big D rolled his arm and flexed his muscles, grinning and ready for a fight. He tore off his shirt and said that they would have a duel, man-to-man, and he showed off his huge and built body in comparison to the lean teenage muscle of our boy Sean. Dmitry Medvedev was Barefoot's second in command, and his nickname was Grizzly. Blondie's eyes widened as a knife came flying at him and he barely got out of the way. But the mercenary caught him, seizing him by the hair, and he slapped our dude so hard that Blondie saw stars. Big D had gotten serious in beating up our dude and he kneed him right in the stomach. Our dude grabbed the man's hand, glaring at Big D with pain and anger. He smacked the dude with his chin, and the mercenary's chin took a serious hit. They both split apart, sliding to different sides of the room, each injured in a way. Blondie groaned as he nursed his wound, realizing that he got fractured by the dude's hit. It was not over yet, and the mercenary was still eager to keep going. The mercenary slashed at our dude, slicing an arc in the air as our dude jumped backwards, and Blondie could not help but wonder what was up with that dude. He had hit Big D's chin at least 3 times now, still the man was relentless and beat our dude back. Blondie could barely keep up with his opponent's smacking combat, and he got smacked by Big D's powerful thrusts and hits. The mercenary grinned wickedly as his lightning-fast fists kept trying to punch holes in our dudes. Big D laughed and asked how long our dude was going to keep dodging, and he asked our dude to come at him like he had done earlier. It was taking a lot for Blondie to just block his attacks, and the blonde asked the man if he had ever received a reward when he was young. Sean confessed that he had never received an award. Then he slammed the big dude with his feet and the mercenary growled, asking the kid what nonsense he was spouting. Blondie went on beating the guy as best as he could, saying that he would give the big man an award. He shoved the award against Big D's neck, and the blonde told the big man to consider the award a souvenir that he picked up from Korea. He smacked the award even harder into the Russian's neck, and the big man spat blood. Our dude sighed in relief and he said that he gave the man a really big award, so that the man could put it in his resume or something. Now then, our dude rolled his arm and groaned, saying that it was time for him to go meet up with Rachel. However, he paused and noticed something, and he stared at the picture. Meanwhile, someone pulled out a hockey stick from the corner and our dude was so focused on the picture while the Big D attacked. Our dude managed to dodge the hit that nearly shattered a table. The Russian cursed and called our dude a rat jerk, and he coughed hard. Our dude stepped on the man's thigh and grabbed his neck, growling that his opponent was annoyingly persistent. He could not even believe that the Russian could move in his condition. Our dude insisted that if the mercenary was this persistent, then the sexy trainer would start to hate him. The burly man growled in hate as he struggled against the boy strangling him. Eventually, he lost his breath and dropped his weapon. Big D fell to his knees in defeat, but our dude was not quick to let go. He was very careful, but then he stepped back curiously to watch the fallen guy. Then, our dude noticed a picture of himself in a file full of other pictures. Our dude was surprised to see his picture and a picture of the principal, but he paused when he realized something else. Meanwhile, at another side of the school, the young Eugene scanned the empty side of the school pool. He peeked into the water, saying that their target could not be inside, and the dude with silver hair appeared, asking what was in the water and what the little boy was looking for. Eugene jumped back in shock, leaping away from the silver-haired man. The little kid was startled that he did not even feel his presence, and he wondered how the dude had snuck up on him. One thing for sure, the silver-haired man was not an average person. The man apologized for startling the young boy. Little Crazy's first instinct was to inform the sexy trainer of the new villain that had appeared. However, he was confused about not being able to reach the trainer. The silver-haired dude smiled and explained that he had set up a disruptor so that the kid would not be able to use the communicator. The silver-haired man insisted that the little boy play with him instead as he unzipped his weapon. Eugene immediately recognized that person as a professional, so he needed to avoid fighting them head-on. So, the little boy took a deep breath and then pretended to cry. He cried very loudly, apologizing that he had been wrong, and he begged the silver-haired man to forgive him. The silver-haired guy could not believe that the kid was crying right now. Eugene cried that he had just come along because he was told to, and he sobbed like he was scared. His opponent asked why he was crying, and the little boy wailed that he was scared and that he wanted to go home. He thought that he was making progress and that his opponent would let his guard down. However, to his shock, he saw a metal bat come swinging right at him. The little boy got knocked back, flying across the room like a baseball, and he fell a long way, landing on his back. He managed to block the attack from hitting his face, but the little boy could not believe that the man had swung a bat at him. The stranger had hit a crying child without hesitation, and the silver-haired man laughed that he had not done anything to make the boy cry yet, and that it was really interesting. The crazy guy laughed that hitting Eugene had felt really good. He was Yuri Smirnov, Barefoot's newbie, and his nickname was Gopnik. The man Gop smiled, saying that it was good for the little boy to cry, and the Gop asked Little Crazy to cry every time he got hit. His nickname, Gopnik, translated to the word bully in Russian. Little Eugene was a good child of the Dead Mansion and he had been specially trained since he was young, and he could complete any mission that had been assigned to him no matter the situation. The little boy often boldly approached armed men, crying like a defenseless child, and the guards would be surprised to see a child. The guards would then ask how he got there, and the little boy would look at them with eyes of confusion. The guard asked again how the child got there, and he asked what the guys at the main gate were doing. However, when he called main gate, there was no response because the guards were covered in blood, so no matter how much they called, the bodyguards did not answer. The guard eventually got frustrated and cursed the failures at the main gate. Meanwhile, the second guard smiled and kindly asked the child how he had gotten down there. The pitiful little boy cried, saying that he had come with his dad, and that he had to go to the bathroom. The grown men acknowledged the boy's struggles, saying that his dad must be inside. Children were seen as weak, so the man let down his guard and asked the boy for his father's name. The other guard told his colleague not to be so pushy, and that he was making the child cry. Adults always instinctively tried to protect children. They scolded each other for being rough on him, and a child's tears always invoked protective instincts in an adult. While the first guard was distracted, the boy lunged with a knife. The second guard thought that it was strange as he went through the guest list, as he was sure that none of the guests had arrived with a child. However, he turned to see his colleague lying face down, and he asked the man what he was doing. Blood seeped from the man's head, and the other guard gasped, cursing, and asked what was going on. He realized that his colleague was dead and he instantly suspected the child's involvement. The guard searched for where the child was hiding, just as the child popped up from behind him with a knife and stabbed at him, cutting the second guard down. Eugene was not a regular child. He was a child who had received special training from Dead Mansion. He spoke through his communicator to inform his instructors that he had taken care of the situation, just as he had been ordered to. The little boy always strictly followed the orders that he had been given, no matter the situation. However, he groaned in pain as he could not believe the nerve of his new opponent. The crazy silver-haired bully had not hesitated to attack even a crying child. The silver-haired maniac grinned, saying that this was fine, and the little boy realized that this crazy person actually enjoyed hitting children. The bully gripped his bat tightly and asked the little boy if he was all done crying. The silver-haired freak was very disappointed about that, and he asked the child to keep crying. He even further goaded Little Crazy, asking the little boy if he would cry again if he hit him a couple more times. Our boy Eugene tensed up, realizing that this crazy adult was very different from the others. The man with the silver hair lunged at the kid, and the little boy braced himself for the confrontation. The big metal bat was slammed on the floor, shattering it to pieces as the little boy dodged the attack. Little Crazy was shocked, recognizing that the power the attacker used was different from before. The crazy man with silver hair asked the little boy how the attack was, saying that although the bat looked normal, it had been made specially for the bully. The bully asked if that was not awesome, as he once again wildly swung his bat, and again the little child dodged. Little Crazy caught himself on his hand, and the silver-haired bully smirked, asking the little boy how long he was going to keep running around. The bully did not want to keep playing chase, so he came up with an idea and switched up the way he held the bat, so that he used it like a pounding stick. The bottom end of the bat came down hard on the foot of the little boy, whose eyes widened in shock and horror, and the child let out a scream of pure agony. The little boy twirled his pointed weapon, and he slashed at the big guy, but the bully just blocked the attack with his huge bat. Then, the kid leapt off the balcony, taking the moment to escape from his crazy attacker. However, the little boy's landing was sloppy and he groaned in pain as he fell. Amused, the silver-haired bully looked down from the balcony and smirked, telling the little boy that he would give him 10 seconds. The little boy was told to run as far as he could while limping. The silver-haired dude then raised his 2 hands and started counting down the seconds with a mad look of twisted glee in his eyes. The little boy bolted in fear as the countdown began. The silver-haired manic bully counted down from 9 to 8, and the little boy was still running. He slid across the room, realizing that he was facing a man who was not at all an average opponent, and he only had 10 seconds to hide. The little boy had to run as far as he could within that little time, but the ache in his smashed and bloody foot was slowing him down. The little boy winced, knowing that he just needed to run a little more, but the silver-haired bully had suddenly appeared with his swinging bat. The bat crashed into the ground where the little boy had been standing, but fortunately, he had been able to dodge. It had not even been up to 10 seconds yet, and the little boy pointed that out. However, the crazy and manic silver-haired dude just laughed in joy at seeing the child's expression of despair and confusion. The man laughed at the little boy for believing his words, and the bat came swinging towards the little knife that the small child held. The silver-haired laughed about innocent children like Eugene as the little boy fought hard to guard against the bat. However, his attacker was too strong and the little boy found himself flung backwards and he fell into the pool. The child's body made a huge splash when he hit the pool and the ripples sailed across the water. The grin on the silver-haired dude widened, and he smiled that little children were so much fun to bully. The child struggled inside the water, groaning that his arms hurt so bad from trying to defend against the bat. As expected, the little boy felt like he was just a useless kid. However, as the little child was about to succumb to his depression, a memory of our dude flashed into his mind. The little kid suddenly imagined Blondie mocking him and calling the child a useless kid who could never be part of a family. Blondie mocked the child that he needed to be disposed of, and Lil Crazy protested, shouting that he never said that. It was a memory from before they headed out to do the mission, and the sexy trainer had told the 2 boys to stop messing around and get ready. Blondie agreed to get serious and he stopped teasing the child. Blondie finally said that he would finally stop making fun of the child, and the little boy asked the blonde if he planned on saving Huno's mom. The child pointed out that the old woman had given up her right to him, and that she was no longer the blonde's family. The blonde muttered that he did not get what the kid was trying to say, and the child said that just like that lady said, the blonde was weird. The child did not understand why our dude kept trying to save the old woman when they were not even really family. Considering the child had an unknown background, he could not understand why the old woman had argued about his definition of a family. Blondie had scratched his hair back then, and asked the little boy what he thought. Blondie asked the little boy if Huno's mother was family to him too, and the little boy hesitated. He recalled how the old woman had gently patted his head, and he recalled the warmth of her hand on his head. The little boy had admitted that he did not know, and he did not understand the old woman's definition of family. It was completely different from what the child knew, and he could not understand it. Then, the blonde patted the little boy's head and told him to ask her the next time he saw her. The blonde told the little boy what the old woman had told him, and that the old woman had said that she wanted the blonde to bring Eugene along next time. The little boy was surprised and asked if the old woman really said that, and the blonde acknowledged it. Our guy smiled and said that he would bring the little child along to see the old woman next time. Then the child could ask her himself. The little child wondered what a family really was, and the silver-haired bully looked into the pool at the child, wondering if the kid could not swim. The child burst out of the water, gasping for breath and screaming loudly, and the silver-haired bully grinned with joy that the little boy had come out. The small child screamed that he did not know how to swim and he desperately splashed in the water. The bully laughed that the child really could not swim, and he laughed that the kid was way too fun to mess with. He handed out his bat to the child, telling the kid to grab on. The boy struggled inside the water, trying and failing to reach the bat, which slightly annoyed his opponent. Eugene was a child who invoked protective instincts in adults. However, the trashy jerk that he was fighting did not care about children. The silver-haired man smiled wickedly and laughed that he was enjoying the child's struggle. He added that the child would get to live as long as he made it up to the bat. But the bully already had a record for not keeping his word. The little boy swam up to the bat and grabbed it, his face desperate. However, the bat got yanked back, and the boy stared in shock when he lost his hold on the bat. The silver-haired man wickedly smiled that the bat had slipped, and that it was too bad for the kid. The little boy sank back into the water and he floated pathetically in the pool. The bully laughed that he was really going to save the kid if he had just held on a bit longer. Well, the silver-haired man laughed that he'd had enough fun. However, the little child could not give up here and he desperately grabbed the leg of the silver-haired man. The bully turned in surprise at the sudden touch on his leg. The little boy then drove his feet into the pool and tugged hard on the man's leg. The bully had been standing too close to the edge of the pool, and the little boy pulled with all of his might. He wanted to complete the mission no matter the situation, and the bully got dragged into the pool. The bully burst out of the water in rage and screamed that the jerky kid had dared to trick him. However, the little Eugene was rather confident when it came to acting. He jumped up behind the man and grabbed his neck in a tight hold. The little boy was good at acting because he had been specially trained, and the bully struggled and cursed in hatred. The silver-haired man was angry that the boy had lied about not being able to swim, and that it was not fun anymore. The child laughed at him and called him gullible, teasing the bully for believing those words. The child laughed and called the bully an amateur because the little child had been specially trained to be a good child. The silver-haired bully struggled, screaming for the little boy to let go of him immediately, and he called the kid a brat. The child was annoyed that the bully was a lot more stubborn than he thought, and the bully refused to drown. The child tried to keep his hold just a little bit more, but the bully was not having it. He growled for the kid to let him go and raised his metal bat while struggling in the water. The bully managed to slam the kid's arm and wiggled free of his hold. The silver-haired jerk laughed and cursed at the kid. He turned around in the water and swung the bat at the child, still hellbent on ending his life. However, the little boy dodged more easily in the water and swam down, bursting up after he had swam a considerable distance. It would have been more dangerous to fight the violent bully if not for the water, and the jerk in question stood on the pool divider. The bully glared like a monster from a horror movie and swore to finish the kid off. The little boy was a little intimidated seeing that his opponent had climbed to higher ground. The silver-haired bully leapt without restraint and again flung his weapon to hit the child. Once again, the child dove down and managed to dodge the attack. So, the bully goaded him, asking the little boy if he was going to stay in the water forever. The bully laughed that the boy thought it was better to hold his breath than to get beat. However, he grinned like a devil, wondering how long the boy would be able to hold out. Little Crazy had met someone even crazier than he was, and he cursed mentally. The little boy had to find a way out of this situation, and he swam around in the pool. Suddenly, his opponent called to him and said that if the kid kept moving around, he would use up more oxygen. Even the little kid knew that he could not keep going on like this for just a bit. He needed to take a small breath before diving back down, but that would put him in danger. He knew that as soon as his head broke the water and he tried to take a breath, the wicked silver-haired bully monster would swing his bat down with the intent to kill. The little boy would die for sure from a head injury that severe, and he had no idea what to do to avoid such a gruesome fate. The wicked bully leaned even more as he watched the kid, smirking that 2 minutes had passed. He was plenty impressed by the kid's ability to hold his breath, but time was running out. The bully villain goaded the kid more, asking to come on. The bully laughed that he had thought that the kid would be useless. However, the child was proving more troublesome than he thought. Meanwhile, the little kid had a plan, and he pulled out a knife. In one slash, he cut the rope that the guy was standing on, making the bully jump back. The bully was surprised and he fell into the water while the kid used the opportunity to steal a very large breath. Once again, he held his breath and dove down, much to the annoyance of the silver-haired bully who was angry that the kid used puny tricks to win. They faced each other in the water now, and the bully villain grabbed his bat, thinking that a small toy knife would never be enough for the kid to win. To begin with, swinging a weapon under the water was pointless, and the water resistance would fight against it. The bully was surprised that fighting underwater was not working out for him, but he had no other choice. In the water, there was more resistance, so a bigger weapon would be at a disadvantage. Meanwhile, Little Crazy was launching at him with his tiny knife, because a small weapon and a small body had the advantage. Little Crazy lunged, but the big bully managed to dodge the knife. However, the little boy managed to loop a rope around the silver-haired dude's head, and he pulled with all his might, strangling the nasty demonic bully. The bully cursed in Russian, tugging at the ropes that held his neck. However, Eugene could not let go as his life depended on it. They stayed underneath the water and time passed. Then, the little child finally emerged from the water, gasping for breath. Eugene glared at the floating body of the unconscious bully and told the freak to never again look down on someone smaller. The child grinned and stuck out his tongue, calling the bully an amateur. Meanwhile, back with Rachel, the sexy trainer reloaded her gun with her teeth and fired at the many goons that were after her as she ran down the hall with little Mary in tow. The trainer could only go so fast with the injury on her leg, but they kept running and shooting at the men who shot at them. Many of the men were taken down by the trainer's relentless bullets, but the little fox face watched her teacher with worry and asked the trainer if she was okay. The trainer assured the little girl that she was fine, and she asked how the fox face was doing. Things had ended up becoming more complicated than they had expected, and the little girl mumbled that it might be better to retreat for now. However, the trainer had a dark look on her face as she said that they would stay and kill them all since that was the order. Besides, our dude was facing the big D, so they had to take care of the small fries. However, the trainer had already run out of bullets, and Foxface pointed out that it would be hard to deal with the enemies with just the two of them. The big guy called Dmitri, the silver-haired bully called Yuri, and even the barefoot group had never been within their calculations. The little girl wanted to at least get back up, but that would not be possible, and the trainer told her that she was speaking the words of the weak. Foxface pointed out that she was just being realistic since they were both injured. However, the sexy trainer mentioned that she was curious about something. Earlier, the little girl had said that she was not sure, but the trainer asked how Foxface was now so sure that Yuri was here. For a moment, the girl stared silently at her trainer, then she let out a little wicked giggle. The little girl laughed that she had made such a stupid mistake, and that Eugene would have called her an amateur if he was there. The trainer turned her gun towards the little girl, realizing that it was just as she had suspected. She could not understand how the girl had betrayed Dead Mansion when no child had ever before broken out of control. The trainer ordered the girl to explain how she had been able to betray them, hurt on her face, and the little girl just smiled that they had found it. Mary beamed as she tossed aside her rosary and confessed that they had found a way to overcome the 3 principles. The trainer was confused and could not believe what she was hearing. The little girl had said over and we, so the trainer asked who else was a part of this plot. The little girl replied by saying that Null was back, and the trainer's face darkened with horror and disbelief. The little girl then laughed and grabbed the trainer's gun, saying that was enough. She snatched the last bullet clip from Rachel with a wicked smile on her evil little face. However, the trainer was not having it and she attacked in rage. The sexy trainer slashed at the little girl, who took the opportunity to dig into the trainer's wound, making the trainer fall as the girl took advantage of her weakness. The trainer called out to the little girl, grabbing her tiny leg, and the trainer, who looked a little demonic in the moment, asked the little girl how she knew of the name Null. However, as they fought, the goons had gotten closer and they now pointed a gun at the back of the sexy trainer's head. They told the pretend nun that she had done enough, and the nun cursed at them with rage in her eyes. The goons laughed at her and told her to calm down, slamming her head into the wall. Now, it was their turn to retaliate for the beating she had given them. One of the goons popped out to ask how the fight was going, and little Mary beamed with joy, asking the man if he had waited for a long time. She happily informed him that it was over, and they dragged the sexy trainer by her hair on the floor. The little girl said that it was time to get rid of the rest now, and she grinned, intending to go capture the legendary Sean, while smirking wickedly at the bruised and battered face of her trainer, who had lost all hope in her eyes. The showdown continues at the school, and the greedy businessman speaks to the old woman. He takes her hand, telling her that it is their turn to take revenge now. The villainous man smiled and said that they needed to get rid of Parkshan, much to the old woman's horror. The old woman's hand shook as she held the knife in her hands, and she stared at the businessman in disbelief and horror. However, much to the man's disappointment, the old woman was not at all sold on his beliefs, and she told him that people like the villainous businessman were not even worthy of being called a parent, and she threw the knife aside. The man watched the knife clatter to the ground, echoing her words. The wicked man then laughed and wondered, since the old woman was neither taking the settlement nor the revenge. The villain laughed and asked if someone just flipping rice cakes, even with their child in a difficult medical condition, could be called a parent. The old woman slapped the man in the wheelchair, but the man wiped his bloody nose, saying that he had thought that things were going well. However, as expected, it was getting annoying. The doors opened and hefty men came in as the businessman smiled and said that work was all about efficiency. The old woman was horrified to see so many goons. Meanwhile, our dude popped the picture he had found into his pocket and decided that he would hold on to this for now. He groaned and popped his back, sighing that his whole body hurt thanks to the dumb Big D. He muttered at how funny the story would be of him fighting a Russian mercenary in the principal's office. Our dude knew that no one would believe that and that it made no sense. Buying Wu construction was amazing too, and Blondie wondered how they had ever contacted Russian mercenaries in the first place. Not any random person would be able to contact fighters that good. That is when our dude paused in realization, and he repeated that the mercenaries were indeed not people that just anyone could contact. Realizing that things had gone from bad to worse, Blondie cursed as he raced away with furious speed. He asked himself why he had not thought of this sooner, and he slid to a stop as soon as he found the goons. The goons were shocked to see him once more and they started to raise an alarm. Our dude put a quick stop to that by kneeing the alarm raiser in the face. The blonde yelled in annoyance that the goons identified him by his hair and asked if they could not remember his name. As our dude blocked their attacks and fought off the goons, he told them to forget it, as he had no idea why he bothered wasting time with them. He slammed another of the goons in a very firm punch and the man went flying backwards. The men cursed at him in hatred as he prepared their weapons, and one of them fired at him, but Blondie just used another dude for a shield. The living shield panicked and told the other man not to shoot, and Blondie echoed him mockingly, reminding the dude's colleague that he was not to shoot. It hurt like heck to get hit by a bullet and our dude rushed at him in an attack. The big dude still stubbornly pointed his gun at our dude, mentally swearing to blow the kid's head off. He was sure that he would be able to hit him, but our dude used his elbow to smack the gun out of the way. He moved with hands like lightning and the gun ended up firing on an empty space. Blondie had the force like a bear and he hit the goon so hard that the villain saw stars and lost all sense of reason. Blondie's first was like iron and his eyes could be exceptionally cold and keen. Meanwhile, the sexy trainer groggily opened her tired and aching eyes. She looked surprised that she was still alive, and partly surprised that she had been beaten and betrayed. The little Mary had been waiting for her to wake, and she greeted the trainer as she came to her senses. The trainer screamed in rage and hatred, cursing the little girl and asking how the child had dared to betray them. However, the little girl just smiled and told the grown woman to calm down and listen. The little child smiled and said that she was not trying to betray Dead Mansion at all, sitting comfortably with her legs crossed. Mary said that she was just showing the mansion who the greatest product truly was, as she sipped cheekily from a mug. The sexy trainer was confused by the girl's words, so the girl went on to say that the director had said that the greatest product in the legend of Dead Mansion was Sean. The little girl had heard it directly from the director as the old man had grinned at her. The director had told her that Sean was different from the other great products, and he was already complete even when he was young. The director had told her to work hard to become like him since he was the greatest product ever. Mary had hated that kind of talk, and she angrily asked why everyone was so hung up on that old thing. Then, the little girl had thought to herself, and she had wondered just how great the boy was for all of them to act like that. However, the Sean that she had seen was no better than a dumb middle schooler, and it had all been so disappointing. That was when she had understood, and she crouched before her teacher to explain. The legend was nothing but a made-up story. The little girl patted her trainer's head, saying that she had thought that the director wanted to cover up the mistake of losing Sean by glorifying the boy as a legend. Well, the little girl said that she could understand that as she quickly pulled her hand away before her teacher could bite her. The girl laughed that it might be better for the adults to just acknowledge someone, rather than to own up to their own mistakes. That was why she was going to show the director by herself, and the little girl rolled up her sleeves as she repeated that the legend was no more than a made-up story. She smiled and revealed the tattoo on her hand, saying that she would show the director who the real greatest product of the Dead Mansion was. She was Mary, the Dead Mansion's greatest strategist, and she was also known as DVA2. The trainer stared at the little girl, looking very unimpressed, and she watched the cameras that tracked Blondie as he walked through the halls. Blondie paused because he saw something, and then the camera behind Mary went static. That was when the trainer bent her head and let out a small laugh. The little girl scowled and asked her trainer what was so funny. However, the trainer just laughed, saying that a little kid like Mary was acting so cocky. The sexy trainer smiled, saying that in the end, the little was just throwing a fit since the director only cared about Sean. The trainer laughed again about how the girl said that they had just acknowledged the boy in order to cover things up, and she added that the little fox face had been talking nonsense. Still, Fox Face refused to be swayed and said that she was sure that the adults would not admit it, turning her back on her trainer, who warned the little girl that she would never stand a chance against Sean. The sexy trainer laughed and said that a faulty product like the fox-faced girl had no right to speak such nonsense. Now, this angered the little girl deep into her core, and she yanked her gun out of her bag. She shot at the trainer, aiming so that the bullet merely grazed the woman's cheek, and Fox-Face glared, telling the trainer that the shot was a warning. The little girl warned that she had the ability to hurt her trainer, and if the woman dared to call her a faulty product one more time, then the scar on her head would be more than a scar. It would become a hole, and the little girl emphasized this by pressing the gun deep against the trainer's head. However, the trainer merely smiled in amusement at the little girl's harsh words, and said that she seemed to have hit a sore spot for the little girl. Just then, the businessman wheeled into the room and apologized for interrupting the conversation between the ladies. The businessman said that his side had just about wrapped things up, and it looked like Mary's side was almost done as well. The villain asked if he had perhaps interrupted something important, and that it was regrettable. After everything the business villain had received from the sexy trainer's hands, just a couple holes in her body would not be enough for vengeance. The man was willing to take it one step at a time. Someone asked the businessman what was up with his face and if he had gotten hit. However, the man just glanced at his bleeding face and said that there had only been some small trouble, and a scene showed the kind old woman passed out at a desk. However, the businessman went on to say that things ended as expected, and Huno was on the roof surrounded by 3 thugs, and the boy was unconscious. Mary congratulated the businessman, telling him that he had worked hard and that things had proceeded smoothly thanks to him. The businessman thanked her instead, saying that he was glad that he had gotten to work with someone easy to speak to. The businessman then continued to say that they would proceed as planned, when suddenly the big muscular dude with glasses grabbed him and choked him with a handkerchief. The businessman could not understand what was going on, and he slowly lost consciousness. The little girl told the villain's unconscious body that he had no reason to feel bad, and that she had just received an offer. After all, this was how adults handled things, and the little girl giggled to the businessman, telling him that his usefulness had ended the moment he brought Sean there. Little Mary then laughed and said that she would let the unconscious villain be the main character of this incident. She was going to let the man take all the blame, and say that it was an incident caused by a father bent on getting revenge for his son since it sounded good. Then, the little girl smiled and wondered where Blondie would be at this moment. She turned her focus to all the blank security camera screens, and frowned in confusion. The screens were not supposed to be blank. Then, the trainer said that there were kids that were pretty special within the Dead Mansion. The little girl turned to the trainer, who laughed and explained that they had taken those kids with talents, and had given them the title the greatest along with the nickname. In Mary's case, it was DVA, and she was called the greatest strategist, much to the little girl's chagrin as she wanted to be the supreme greatest. The little girl asked the trainer what she was trying to say, and the trainer laughed, telling the little girl that before she had even arrived at the Dead Mansion, their Sean had been the greatest product with all of the girl's talents. Our dude had been the greatest product, but the little girl could not believe that there was anyone greater than she was. Suddenly, all the screens in the room went black, and the big dude with glasses pointed out that a blackout had occurred, as a crack began to form in the ceiling. The girl screamed for him to look out, but our dude had already manifested. Blondie broke through the roof above the big man and slammed his fist down on him in a very heavy and violent blow. Out of all the children the Dead Mansion had ever produced, the trainer grinned with glee and knew that codename Sean was, without a doubt, the greatest product, and he was now at the scene. His code name was Sean. His name was Parkshan and he was the Dead Mansion's greatest product, Ajin. When our blonde dude was much younger, he had been told how amazing he was. The director had smiled, telling the boy that although the kids at Dead Mansion were all great, the little blonde boy was on another level. Only a child like the little blonde, who had top-notch skills and talent, could truly be considered the best of their Dead Mansion. The little boy had been called a masterpiece as he stared blankly at the door right in front of him. The director had said that the little blonde boy was the Dead Mansion's second masterpiece, but he quickly corrected himself and instead said first. Once again, the little boy was congratulated and he was brought to a room where a dangerous-looking tattoo artist waited. The boy grew tense and nervous as the director placed his hands on the child's shoulders, echoing that the child was their greatest masterpiece. The priest asked the little boy if he understood as the tattoo artist got ready. Behind them, a little girl with huge round glasses watched on. Of course, the little girl had been an angry Mary, and she glared at the director and the little boy. Now, at the hospital, our blonde dude had taken down the big guard with glasses. The trainer yelled out to our dude, warning him about little Fox Face. However, our dude was already well aware of the situation. He already had a rough idea what was going on while he made his way to them, and the little girl laughed. As for the details of what was going on, our dude made up his mind to beat those out of the grinning little girl. Mary laughed, teasing our dude for threatening to beat a little girl, and she reached into her pocket to pull something out. The little girl laughed as our dude blocked her hit, saying that Hyunho's mom would hate to hear that Blondie had been going around beating people up. However, the blonde glared and asked the little girl if she even had the right to say that. He asked her whose fault it was that all of this happened. As expected, the little girl was attacking him even though he was part of the Dead Mansion. Our dude narrowed his eyes as he realized this meant that the girl could bend the rules and get around the three principles. Blondie decided that he would think about all of that complicated stuff later and leapt at the girl, much to her surprise. Our dude then reminded her that she had attacked him first as he retaliated without remorse. The little girl laughed, saying it was as she expected of Sean, and that she had guessed that it was a bit too much to win against him with strength alone. Then, Fox Face lunged at him and wrapped her arm around his neck as she brought him down. Our dude was swept off his feet, but he managed to catch himself with an arm and demanded she tell him of the technique that she had used. Even the trainer was shocked since it was not something that they taught in Dead Mansion. The little girl, however, had no interest in answering and she tossed open the door to flee. The trainer commanded Blondie to chase after her and that they had to catch Fox Face. There must be someone working behind the little girl and they had to figure out who it was. Blondie was surprised and a little confused by this order, but the trainer insisted, yelling that she would explain everything much later. So, our dude cursed, but he went along with it and launched himself after the running girl. As he ran, Blondie pondered the trainer's words about there being someone who worked to orchestrate Mary's betrayal. Our dude wondered what that meant. But anyway, only one thing was important at that moment. Whether it was Mary or the jerk behind her, someone knew how to bypass the three principles and that information was gold to Blondie. So, our dude called out to the little girl, telling her to just stop for a second since he had a question that he wanted her to answer. The little girl was not taking questions and she dashed inside a room instead, much to our dude's chagrin as he begged her to stop running so much. Racing after her, he chased her down into the room she entered, just to find that she had suddenly stopped running. The little girl smiled, strange-looking vials in her hands as she asked who was running. She turned to our dude, suddenly equipped with gloves and a gas mask, and said that she was just getting started. A whole new challenge had arisen as she flung the vials and an explosion of glass and fire filled the laboratory. The small sparks began to ignite on the floor, much to our dude's alarm, and he covered his head just as an explosion rang out. Blonde recognized the smell and the explosive reaction of sodium metal, red phosphorus, and ammonia. They sure had a lot of stuff in the science class, and he covered his nose as he raced out. It would be dangerous for him to inhale it, but as he protected his nose with a sleeve, something else came flying at him. Our dude barely dodged Mary lunging at him, and he coughed violently, accidentally taking a lungful of the stuff she had gassed the room with. Still, the relentless, jealous little girl swung, and he raised his sleeve in time to block out her bloody slash. It tore the sleeve of his jacket and into his skin. The battle raged furiously and again the little girl attacked, hoping to take her senior down in his moment of weakness, and she slashed at him yet again, her own jacket flying in the wind. She smiled as she located the spot where he had been hurt by his opponent the Big D, and our dude cursed that she had been watching everything all this time. He cursed again, knowing that he needed something that he could use as a weapon as she continued her relentless assault. The little girl refused to give him breathing room for a counterattack, declaring that she had analyzed everything about him. Whenever he was at a disadvantage, he tended to look around for something useful, just like he had done during his fight against their trainer in the supermarket, and like he had done when he fought the big Russian mercenary. However, the little girl laughed that our dude was not the only one who could make use of their surroundings, and saying this, she kicked a globe off a table and it went flying the wound in his arm, further aggravating it. Our dude groaned as he hit the wall from the force of the attack, cursing that his wound had opened. The bleeding was also serious, but before he could process that, shards of glass and fire came flying towards him once again. Once again, the materials exploded and our dude narrowly got away. grabbing his jacket. Blondie flung it away and towards the raging lunatic of a little girl who was charging at him. The flaming jacket flew over the head of the masked girl as she charged towards our dude. However, she froze when she saw no sign of him where she expected him to be. With narrowed eyes, little Fox Face searched for our dude, but the room was empty and a trail of blood led into the hallway. Meanwhile, our dude had made some good distance, and he cursed while clutching his wound. He had lost more than he had thought as he stumbled down the hall, and our dude was fairly annoyed by Fox Face's annoying habit of loving to hit the same place over and over. It was sometimes dangerous to fight the little girl. Our dude groaned, annoyed that he would be losing to someone like her, and he cursed the damn bear for beating him that bad and getting in his way. Seeing the trail of blood he was leaving, our dude then tried to recall who was in charge of cleaning the library because they were in for quite a shock. Then, for a moment, our dude fell silent. He recalled the dark smile on the trainer's face, and he muttered to himself in hatred as his hand balled into a fist. All of that had supposedly happened because of him, and he could not so easily forget her words. Then, the sound of booted feet approaching filled the room as the little girl called out his name. Little Mary asked where her big brother had gone as she stalked him in the library, and she gasped dramatically when she saw the trail of blood leading up the stairs. With this much blood on the floor, the little girl laughed that it would be harder not to notice our dude. Giggling, she asked if he was even alive, adding that the title of the greatest had been given to him, but the little girl felt that it was a bit strange. Usually, titles were given based on the children's unique talents, but the director had named only Sean as the greatest, and that really bothered her more than anything else. As the little girl stalked up the stairs, she added that she believed it was a mistake, and that the director had given that title too easily. With many more exceptional children to come in the future, the little girl said that it did not make sense to give the title of the greatest to someone already. In other words, little Fox Face believed that the director had been too quick to act. Sliding into attack mode with wicked glee, Fox Face said that it was unfit to call our dude the greatest when he lacked even the basics. However, the little girl slid to a stop on seeing just a little puddle of blood but no Sean in sight. Mary bent and noticed a stapler on the ground, and that is when our dude appeared behind her, mocking the little girl for talking too much. He even asked her why she talked so much and she turned in fury. However, he easily blocked her attack with a book, much to her surprise. Blondie's left arm had been bleeding. Fox Face had been sure of that. She could not believe that our dude had stopped his bleeding with a stapler, and our dude said that before the little girl went on about masterpieces and all that, he thought that she should first learn the basics, and he gave her a very disrespectful punch that sent her flying across the room. Then, he grabbed her hoodie and jerked his thumb at a sign. Our dude reminded the little Fox Face to be quiet in the library as it was basic knowledge. So, she should just quietly answer his questions, and he grabbed her by her cheeks, asking her for the secret behind bypassing the 3 principles. Sean was the Dead Mansion's legend, and the masterpiece. Mary could finally see the level at which our dude was, and she winced as he grabbed her face. Our dude's question was simple, and all he wanted to know was how to bypass the 3 principles. The little girl laughed as she mentioned those principles, saying that it was the rule that some of the half-wits got brainwashed with. However, all Blondie could think about was the way to escape them, and the little girl laughed. The secret of the 3 principles was what our dude wanted to know, so the little girl told a story. Some time ago, in a normal-looking house in a normal-looking neighborhood, a woman gushed beside a man at something. A child set down their pen, telling their parent that they were done. It was little Mary, even smaller than before, and she explained that there had been a mistake in part of the thesis, so she had to correct it. The little girl added that she needed a deeper knowledge in the field to fix it, so she could not, however. She trailed off when her cheeks got pinched, and the woman had called the little girl her lucky star, and had thanked her, calling her sweetie. The little girl had smiled with joy, and later, she came down the stairs to join her father and mother. She told her mother that she had brought coffee, setting down the beverage beside her adopted mother, and the woman had told the little girl to leave it on the desk. Then, the little girl pointed out to her mother that the thesis she was writing had an error, much to the woman's surprise. The little girl pointed out more handier corrections and easier ways of doing things. The woman laughed and thanked her little girl once more, saying that she would have to take a little break. The woman headed up the stairs and said that she would be going to sleep for a bit, so she told the little girl not to wake her. The woman also added that if the little girl was going to rest, then she could go do so in another room. The woman was gone, and then the man spoke up, telling the little girl to just leave her mother alone as the woman was really stressed. The little Fox Face had obediently agreed, focusing her attention on her father who had smiled and said that he was going to head out for a bit. While the father was out, the mother stumbled into the living room in a bathrobe, and the little girl greeted her mother, asking if she had woken. The girl happily said that she had organized the materials while her mother had been asleep, and the woman was surprised as she took off her glasses. While inspecting the organized papers, the woman then asked the little girl where her father had gone, and the little Mary replied that her father had not mentioned where he was going. The woman told the little girl to be sure to ask him next time, and the little girl agreed. though a little nervous. Later, she returned to her mother with photo evidence of her father cheating, and told her mother that she had found out just like the woman had asked her to. The girl her father was cheating with was 28 years old, and after the little girl had followed them, they had entered Hotel 307 outside the city. That was when her mother cut her off with a very loud scream. The woman told her little daughter that she could stop there, and that she did not have to hear any more. When the woman grabbed a mug of coffee, the little girl then said that coffee was no good for her mother's body, especially since her mother was highly stressed. Looking at the coloration of her mother's face and her daily patterns lately, it was highly probable that her mother would keep going through a menstrual imbalance, which was why it was really important for her to rest. The little girl had only wanted to help to the best of her ability, but all of her efforts only earned her a slap from her mother. The little girl stared at her mother in confusion and hurt, and the woman had hated her child, saying that the little girl thought that she was the smartest in the world. The woman glared, saying that the child must consider her lesser, and the woman told the child to not make her laugh, saying that no one could replace her. Coffee dripped to the ground over all the research papers scattered on the floor. Later, the little girl was returned to Dead Mansion, and the director got an understanding of what had happened. However, the director had not expected her to go back there, and that put him in a precarious position. The little girl seated behind him bowed her head in shame and apologized. However, the director patted her head, saying that the little girl had no reason to be sorry. The director had smiled kindly at the little girl, telling her that people tended to feel uncomfortable around others who were better than them, so it was understandable that her mother had reacted that way. After all, to the director, the little girl was the smartest child of their dead mansion. The little girl had stared at the director in surprise and asked if that was really true. He had confirmed it and told the little girl not to feel saddened. Thinking back on it, he realized that he should not have let her get adopted so easily, so he would make sure that the little girl would use her talents for their dead mansion from then on. The little girl had beamed with pride, feeling special to be bestowed such an honor. However, even back then, Sean had suddenly come back into the picture. In the little girl's opinion, the director should not be distracted by someone like him, and Blondie asked why the story was now veering off in annoyance, because he had not at all been curious about her backstory. He asked her to just get to the point about how to get past the principles, and the little girl bit his hand in irritation, telling him that he was wrong. Blondie immediately got heated and prepped to hit her again. However, she blocked his hit with her foot, saying that she was indeed up for a fight. Thanks to him taking a break, the little girl had also been able to catch her breath, much to our dude's surprise. She swiped at him with a weapon, kicking back to create distance between them, so that Blondie was forced to jump back. Blondie swore as he realized that she had just been stalling for time. The girl pulled off her rubber band and her long waves of blonde locks fell over her face as it was realized that she had not been stalling at all. Her attack pose and aura felt different from before, and the little girl said that she would get serious now. She immediately launched an attack against our dude, her fist flying, but he was able to dodge her attack. She was moving surprisingly fast, and as if she could read his mind, the little girl acknowledged that she was indeed fast. However, Blondie paused in shock and asked what she had said. But little Mary was not letting up her attacks, and she laughed, asking our dude why he was so surprised. She could easily grasp his thoughts using only her intelligence, and she kicked out at him, making him lose his balance. Her fist swung as her face shone with wicked glee, but Blondie grabbed a book off the shelf and used the book to block her flying punch. Our dude groaned as he rolled to the side, and the little girl grinned. Little Fox Face declared that her power and speed was now completely different than it had been before, and she knew our dude had noticed that. The little girl laughed that our dude had never thought of it, as he leapt away from her. Even if they were trained from a young age, there had to be a reason why they could hold up against full adults as little children. They could even hold up against professionals. The girl laughed and asked our dude if he had not also felt it before, the feeling of something about to pop in their minds. Blondie was confused by her words and asked if she was going to keep uttering nonsense, so Foxface just laughed that he could not understand, even when she told him this much. However, Blondie suddenly realized something and the little Foxface used his moment of distraction to rush at him with her knife, saying that someone like Blondie could not be called the legendary masterpiece. Our dude was quite frustrated with her stubborn attempt to beat him and he blocked her attack, but then the little devil aimed for his unguarded side, saying it was also a strategy. Our dude cursed and grit his teeth in pain, but he was surprised as he had backed himself to the balcony, and the little devil fox said that was also part of her strategy. The little girl manically laughed at him for not expecting it, and called him stupid. It was over, or so she thought as she launched at our dude and their attacks met each other in a loud explosive noise. Little Mary grinned, declaring herself as the best to ever be produced from Dead Mansion. However, our dude was miffed by that declaration. He glared at her with dark eyes, asking if she thought that this much was enough to be the best. Our dude grabbed the wooden balcony, actually tearing it off and throwing the broken pieces at the fox-faced girl. He then smashed through nearby glass, as he recalled being taught a martial art that was based on the condition that he wield a weapon in both hands. It was a much more dangerous technique and the sensei had said that it was a technique that had the ability to push the opponent to death. Our dude wielded his glass knife in one hand, and he wielded the broken piece of wood in another as he took up the deadly stance of Alexander Kali Arnis. Our dude then launched his attack, and the little girl was shocked to see the move that she recognized coming at her. Blondie attacked, slicing the girl so that blood spilled from her as she flew across the room. Foxface could not understand what was going on, and she thought she should be the best. More than anything, she had wanted the director to acknowledge her as the best, but that was not to be as the Foxface crashed to the ground with blood covering her body. Our dude held the piece of glass to her neck and he loomed over the fallen girl. However, Blondie cursed for a moment and picked up the little girl, saying that this would be the last time. He still needed her information on how to bypass the 3 principles, because our dude would not let her off easy if she had just been joking about that. The little girl was barely conscious with a tear in her eye as she called out for the director. Her call echoed back over Dead Mansion, but not even Dead Mansion was at peace as there were many fallen bodies strewn all over the halls. Within, a man with a crossed-out tattoo on his hand held a sword, and before this sword-wielding stranger, the director knelt with a bloody slash in his tattooed back. The sword-wielding stranger then smiled. The goons on the roof that had been chilling with Hyuno's unconscious body looked up into the sky, and one of them mentioned that it looked like it was about to rain. One of the goons asked how long they would have to be on standby there, and the other muttered that he had no way of knowing. They had just told them to be on standby until they got a signal. The first goon then asked what the signal was going to be, and the other goon muttered that perhaps they would get called or something like that. Once they received the signal, then they would throw Hyuno from the roof. The guards thought the whole menacing process was annoying when they would rather just throw the kid in that moment and then leave. However, the other goon reminded his colleague that the aim was for Blondie to see Hyuno die, though it did create extra work for them. By the way, one of the men crouched beside their victim's unconscious body, and he smirked, knowing that the supposed unconscious boy was definitely listening to them. His guess had been true, and this entire time, the victim had been awake. The goon laughed that they were suffering so much, and the kid they were supposed to kill was just lying down silently and listening to them. The boy asked them to let go of him, but no such luck. Hyuno could not comprehend the situation that he was in, and the men laughed that he did not die even after falling from the 4th floor. However, fear was something that was ingrained, and the goons told the boy not to make it troublesome and to just die this time. They planned to throw him again at the exact same spot that he had landed before, but this time from the roof of the school. Looking down at that large height, the young victim looked like he was going to throw up. He did in fact throw up, and one of the goons cursed in hatred, hating that the boy was having a valid reaction to their words. It was already irritating to the goons that they had to stand in the rain. However, suddenly someone showed up and asked the terrified victim if he was Hwang Hyuno. It was little Eugene, and the little boy had made it to the roof, instantly recognizing the old woman's son. The goons were shocked to see a little kid show up, and they wondered who the heck it was. Just as Eugene had heard, the victim was a weak loser with a face that just screamed despair, and the victim had no idea why he was getting roasted by a little kid. The victim asked the little boy of his identity, and the boy said that if he had to describe himself, he would be someone that would become a regular at the Hyuno snack shop, and he pulled a knife while saying that. The goons cursed at Little Crazy and called him a brat, and they were sure that he was also from Dead Mansion. But before the man could finish his threat, a slash appeared on his arm, and another slash on the second goon's leg. The men screamed in pain as they succumbed to their wounds and fell over in surprise. The goons could not comprehend how a child was so fast, and even the victim could not believe his eyes. The victim could not understand what kind of child had just shown up in front of him. Another of the goons reached for his gun, and the victim could not believe that these men had come to attack them with guns. The victim had no idea what was going on, but while his slow brain was still processing, Little Crazy made quick work of all the men present. However, Hyuno was still worried because he knew one of the men was reaching for a gun, and that meant that Eugene was in danger. He needed to do something. However, the victim was not sure what he could do. He was a weak loser with a face that screamed despair, just like the little boy had said. However, the victim knew despair very well, and as the goon pointed a gun at the kid, the little boy tried to dodge. Unfortunately, that is when the pain in the child's little foot acted up. The boy was frozen and unable to dodge, and the wicked gunman raised his weapon intending to attack. However, the victim then launched himself at the gunman in a rage, shouting that he was not in despair. The victim knocked aside the gun wielder, making him miss the shot, and he even bit at the goon's ear like a wild animal. The gunman screamed out in pain, as the victim asked the gunman what he thought he was doing by aiming his gun at a child. The gunman just screamed in pain because of the agony on his ears. The man then pointed the gun at the victim, determined to kill him first. However, the little kid showed up then, giving the goon a severe kick in the chin as he took back what he had said about Hwang Hyuno. The little boy smiled and congratulated the victim on being somewhat useful. Meanwhile, the heavy downpour continued around the school, and the little fox face groaned as she opened her eyes. She was shocked to awake to see the trainer before her, as the trainer asked the little girl if she was awake. The little girl being awake was good for the trainer, as it would have been troublesome if the little fox face died. The little girl cursed and asked if she had lost. Then she asked where Blondie had gone, and the trainer mumbled blankly about how our dude had said that he had left his clothes somewhere. She knew that was all rubbish, and that our dude had likely gone running to find his fake mother and her true son. That was enough chit-chat for the trainer though, as she had a few questions to ask the little girl. The trainer pulled out a syringe and injected its contents into the girl's thigh, and the trainer said that the girl had no reason to be surprised since this was just a type of truth serum. Of course, the little girl could end up dying from shock if she had to take a few more, but at least now, the trainer expected the girl to earnestly answer her questions, and she seized the little girl by her hair. Darkly, the trainer asked little Mary exactly what she was planning on doing behind their backs. The little girl laughed in response and said that she would have answered such an easy question even without the truth serum. Then, the little girl smiled and said that she was just planning on tearing down half of the current dead mansion with Null. The trainer once again had a look of fear on her face at the mention of that name, and she asked if Null was truly alive. The little girl went on to say that the dark mystery called Null had seemed really worried about the trainer, and that he had said that he had left without saying sorry after he had put that scar on her forehead. The little girl smiled, saying that she indeed knew that the real legend of the dead mansion that they had tried to hide was called Null, and he was alive. This news shocked the trainer to her core and she looked terrified. Meanwhile, our dude kept running as he searched desperately for Hyunho's classroom. Suddenly, he saw the unconscious body of the old woman, and he plastered himself at the window in horror, calling out to her in fear. However, the old woman mumbled her son's name, proving that she was alive, and Blondie groaned in relief that she did not seem hurt. Our dude reached to open the door but froze when he recalled that the old woman had cast him out. He also recalled the trainer's wicked gaze as she had told him that everything going wrong was his fault. For a moment, Blondie hesitated as he was now facing a problem that he could not defeat using super cool martial arts. His head hung in shame and he had no idea what to do when suddenly little Eugene showed up. The boy was happy to see him and laughed at the state that Blondie was in. Blondie looked up in surprise to see the little boy and was just asking the kid if he was hurt when Hyunho stumbled in behind him. For a moment, Hyunho was shocked to see Sean, but the little boy just explained that Blondie was the Sean that he had been talking about earlier. The child went on to further say that Blondie looked like a monkey and acted dumb as well, but he was the one who took out those gangsters who had been after the victim. However, our dude could not bring himself to look the victim in the eye as he was getting eaten up by guilt. Even the victim was perplexed about Blondie having two separate names. The victim stumbled forward on his crutches, not understanding what they were talking about. Russian mercenaries and dead mansion that had nothing to do with a random normie like Hyunho, and he came up to our dude with hate in his eyes, saying that all of this happened because he had gotten mixed up with someone like our dude. Still, our dude could not raise his head nor meet the victim's eyes, even as the victim demanded an explanation on what was going on. Our dude did not know what to say and he stumbled on his words. Just then, Eugene noticed the old lady laying on a desk by herself, and the little boy threw open the door in shock and called her his mother. Hyunho was shocked and asked why his mother was here, stumbling on his crutches, and our dude reached out his hand to help. However, Blondie suddenly froze as he felt something. He felt a dark presence coming from the hallway. Inside the class, Hyunho had already dropped his crutches and shook his mum, telling her to get a hold of herself. While they were doing all that, our dude told the little boy to take the two and to get out. Rachel, their trainer, was in the parking lot, so little Crazy was to rendezvous with her. The little boy was surprised at what our dude was saying all of a sudden and he tried to ask what was going on. However, our dude ruffled the child's hair and said that it was nothing serious. Blondie called out to the victim as the boy helped his mum to his feet. Our dude promised to explain everything to the victim later, but that was all he could say to him at that moment. Our dude apologized with his fist curled. He apologized that he had been unable to protect anyone. Then, our dude turned away as the child carefully escorted out the victim and the old woman. However, before leaving, the victim called out to our dude and called him by his Korean name. The victim said that our dude better explain everything clearly later. The victim wanted to know everything about what our dude had been protecting and what he was sorry about. Hyunho wanted our dude to tell him everything later, and our dude promised that he would. Once the others had gone further away, our dude turned into the dark hallway and told his opponent that they could come out now. The hallway was very dark and for a moment it seemed empty. However, out of the hallway stepped out the figure of a man with the shadow of a beast. It was such a terrifying image that our dude could not help but tense. The person who popped out commended our dude for being pretty sensitive, and the stranger smiled as he recognized the blonde hair and blue eyes, recognizing our dude as Sean. The new guy noted that our dude was a so-called legend, and the stranger had been looking forward to meeting our dude since they were calling him a legend. However, our dude looked quite different from what the stranger had heard. The stranger had expected our dude to look scary, and our dude just asked the weirdo who he was and why he was here. The weirdo introduced himself as Jang Hyun. With nothing but darkness in his eyes, the boy repeated that Jang Hyun was his name. In a snowy town in Siberia, Russia, in the Barefoot's headquarters, which was called the Bear Cave, and it was guarded by many armed men. Someone with many scars on his lips took a swig of alcohol and asked why his visitors had all gathered there. The man with the scars was Beluga Kozlov, and he was the Barefoot strategist. The man knew that his visitors had not come to pray, despite dressing in priest robes. The leader of the visitors asked the strategist if he could not tell their motive just by looking at his expression. They were in a serious situation, and the speaker was Vincent, who was affiliated with Dead Mansion, and he was a writer. The director was angry at the barefoot dudes, and the writer had come to pass that message. There was supposed to be a degree of understanding between people who worked in a similar field, and the barefoot gang always took things too far. The strategist asked what the writer was talking about. But someone behind the strategist spoke up and asked the writer if he was talking about the incident in Korea. The person said that there was nothing that could be done, and that it was just a small incident that happened due to the mission. The speaker was Sasha Denisov, and he was a tactical training instructor from Barefoot. The instructor went on to say that if possible, Barefoot would also like to avoid bumping into Dead Mansion. But the writer called the instructor's words nonsense, and asked if that was why the Barefoot gang had sent in Dimitri, who ranked second in their group. On top of that, they had even sent out Barefoot's best Bare Knuckle, and there was no way that had been an accident. Bare Knuckle was the gang's number one, called Igor Medvedev. The instructor tried to yell out an excuse, but someone told him to stop because he sure was long-winded for a little man. It was the much bigger priest who had been keeping quiet all this time, and the instructor glared at the bigger man, feeling very insulted. He was going to jab back at the big bear of a man when thin wires suddenly encircled his face and his eyes widened. The strategist smirked and poked at the thin wires in amusement, and he asked when the children had gotten there, as the children now lined the entire balcony of the bear cave. The strategist pointed out that what Dead Mansion was doing was child abuse, but they didn't want to hear that from a group of killers. The strategist sighed and pulled out his gun, since it looked like the Dead Mansion agents wanted to see things through to the end that day, and the loser would close shop and go knocking on their coffin. However, as the strategist raised his gun, a child leapt down. The strategist gasped and called the kid a punk for startling him, so the child politely asked the strategist to excuse him. The writer scowled at the little kid, saying that no one had ordered him to come down. However, the kid had something to report to the tattooed writer. The child said that something was off, and the writer asked what the problem was. The boy explained that the director and the others that stayed behind in the Dead Mansion, the child could no longer get in contact with them. This was because of the dude that had broken into Dead Mansion, with a crossed-over tattoo on his hand and a sword in his hand. Suddenly, someone raced inside and yelled for the strategist, who groaned and asked what was wrong. The man whispered something in the strategist's ear that made the man's eyes widen. The strategist looked up in shock and asked the dude what he had just said, and that something had happened to their boss Igor. Meanwhile, the sun had started to rise over the school as the black-haired stranger recognized Sean with his blonde hair and blue eyes. The stranger smiled, saying that he had been nervous about meeting a legend, but the said legend was a lot different from what he had heard. The stranger had expected our dude to look more scary, and our dude asked the stranger who he was. The weird stranger had smiled and introduced himself as Jang Hyan. It was the first time that our dude had heard such a name, and he wondered if the terrifying aura that he had felt in the hallway earlier was really this dude in front of him. The stranger did not look that dangerous on the outside, but then he suddenly flung his leg at our dude, and our dude ended up kicked in the head. Blondie managed to block the kick with his arms, but he noticed that something felt off, and it felt like he was slamming our dude down with a hammer. The stranger beamed that our dude had blocked the kick, and he explained that he had planned to end the blonde in one hit. The blonde fired a fist at the stranger in retaliation, but the dude easily grabbed his arm and flipped him with disrespect, like he was a toddler. While doing all that, the stranger pointed out that things would hurt more if Blondie resisted, and the stranger asked if our dude was alright with that. The stranger was curious, since our dude was called the Dead Mansion's masterpiece or legend or whatever. However, Blondie was not even at his uncle's level, and the stranger kicked our dude away. Our dude groaned as his arms took hit after hit to block the stranger's lightning-fast attacks. The stranger went on to say that our dude should just obediently get knocked down, and he fired another lightning-fast kick at Blondie. The hallway battle raged on, with Blondie more on the defensive as he studied the weird stranger who had shown up out of nowhere. However, Blondie finally spoke up and asked in confusion about the uncle that the stranger had mentioned. Blondie grabbed the stranger by his shirt and leg, muttering about how he had popped out of nowhere and now he was talking nonsense. Our dude was still the legend of the Dead Mansion, and the stranger comparing him to his uncles or whatever did not feel good. Saying that, Blondie hauled the stranger through a window and the glass shattered. For a moment there was peace, and then the stranger remarked in amazement that our dude had really thrown him out the window. The dude crawled back inside with the run rising behind him, and he joked that he thought the kids raised at Dead Mansion were supposed to be good kids. The stranger hopped back inside and mumbled that they were not good at all though. Our dude tried to ask what the heck that dude was on about, when he suddenly got hit in the face. It was the first time that the stranger had attacked him with his hand, and our dude went flying. The stranger chuckled, saying that he could not do that when Null had asked him to bring Blondie back. The stranger laughed that he had almost killed Blondie, and it turned out that our dude had not gone flying at all because the weird dark stranger had stalled his hand and held our dude in place. The rain outside the school continued and got heavier. Little Mary smiled, still goading the trainer, and told her not to act so sensitive, even calling her by her first name. The little girl smiled and said that as long as the trainer just cooperated, she could even join them. The trainer growled that the little girl should not make her life since Fox Face seemed to not understand the situation that she was in. However, the girl just smiled and said that the teacher was the one who failed to understand. He would be there soon, the barefoot leader, Bare Knuckle, who was arriving there on a plane. The girl laughed that they would not be able to go against the number one of Barefoot, Igor. However, they suddenly received a message that Igor would not be coming. This was because his plane to Korea had experienced an unexpected explosion in the sky whilst airborne. The trainer was shocked to hear that the speaker guessed that Igor was somewhere in the middle of the ocean by now. The speaker apologized to Mary, saying that she must have been really excited. The little girl was baffled, and even the trainer was shocked to hear the voice from their communicator that connected them to Dead Mansion. The speaker said hello to the trainer, saying that it had been a while, and he asked if she had been well. The white-haired man who had taken over Dead Mansion explained that he had wanted to go see her himself, but things did not go as planned. He had a lot of things to take care of first at Dead Mansion. And the trainer yelled, asking Null why he was on the director's private line. The wicked white devil smiled and asked the trainer what she meant by that question. After all, the answer was simple, and he was on the director's private line because he was with the director at that moment, and the director had fallen to his knees with his back covered in blood. Regrettably, Null reported that the director was not in the condition to converse with them, and the little girl had asked what the white devil meant in concern for her beloved director. The little girl yelled since the white devil had promised her that the director would be fine. However, the white devil said about that, and then he grinned, apologizing because he had blatantly lied. To begin with, Null's goal had been to destroy the Dead Mansion. So, of course, he would have to get rid of the director as well. That was only common sense. Said director was even bleeding from places on his face, and the white-haired devil thanked the horrified little girl, saying that it was all thanks to her. The white-haired devil then went on to emphasize to the girl how useful she had been in bringing this about and how she had drawn away attention by initiating a conflict with Barefoot. Even the white devil could not have thought of a genius plan like that. It was expected from a masterpiece strategist like her. Thanks to her, most of the really difficult priests had traveled to Barefoot, and they were able to tear down the Dead Mansion pretty easily. Even now, with both groups' leaders being unreachable, they would all start suspecting each other, which would create an even bigger distraction. Both the Dead Mansion writer and the Barefoot strategist got to their feet, and they both grabbed each other's collars, cursing each other out, with the strategist calling the writer a cultist, and the writer calling the strategist a part of the Stinky Bear jerks. The writer glared, asking the strategist if they wanted to see this through to the end, and the strategist agreed as embers of war started to get lit. However, all of that was just a spark, and someone yelled for the two raging sides to stop instantly. This was because the one who stood at the peak of Russia did not allow the fight to ignite. The person yelled and asked them if they had forgotten the teachings of the Alexander family, and the strategist was amazed that the person had come here himself. The giant blonde stranger was Alexander Sophia, and Sophia told them that they better not have known that she was coming. If they had tried to start a fight while knowing she would be there, then it would have been a huge problem. They were in front of a lady, so it was now their duty to throw their weapons down, because the war hero Alexander Sophia had arrived. And there you have it, folks. This fully catches us up with the latest chapter of this series that has been released so far. I'm sure more updates will follow soon in the future, so definitely let me know in the comments below if you want me to keep narrating this story. As usual, if you're new and enjoy my content, please consider subscribing to support the channel and stay notified for future uploads. Until next time.